Well, good evening, everyone. We'll make a start. It's just on 7 o'clock. I want to welcome everyone here tonight. Friends, tonight my fellow councillors and I had the great pleasure of meeting dual Commonwealth gold medalist Tim Diskin. Tim, now I might just get Tim, I might ask you to stand up if you wouldn't mind, Tim, because this is very proud for us. It is for you and your family. Tim Diskin, who grew up in Glen Waverley, born with mild cerebral palsy affecting both sides of his body, had stroke when around 1 month old, causing hydrocephalus. Sorry, Tim. Tim's story of courage, resilience and determination has inspired so many who have watched his success and have cheered him on. It was an honour tonight to meet Tim, his parents Jenny and Barry, brother Jeff and a huge crew of supporters. And I know we will be seeing more from this extraordinary young champion. I'd also like to acknowledge the outstanding efforts of Emily Whitehead from Waverley Gymnastics Club, who won a bronze medal in the beam. We're very proud of the City of Monash, not just with Tim, but also with Emily. Great servants of our community, men and women who work tirelessly to represent their country. And as I said, Tim was kind enough to join us with his family. We're delighted to have you here, Tim, with Mum and Dad and your brother Jeff, who also represented Australia in water polo. So the family is blessed with talent, and we look forward, Tim, to seeing you perform in Tokyo in a couple of years, where I'm sure you'll replicate the success of Rio, where you won gold there against the best in the world. Have no doubt you'll do it again in Tokyo. So round of applause, and thank you, Tim, for coming in. Acknowledging also Colin Batch, head coach of the Australian men's hockey team, and lawn bowler Barry Lister from Mulgrave Country Club, and my sincere apologies to any local athletes that I may have missed. Tonight, Council will be seeking to adopt its draft budget, ladies and gentlemen, and will be available for community feedback until the 28th of May. The draft budget outlines details of proposed capital works of $43 million to improve and renew play spaces, footpaths, roads and other infrastructure in Monash. I encourage you all to look at what is proposed and provide your feedback. And before I close this part of the agenda, I might just defer to my colleague, Councillor Davies. Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to recognise David Appleton, who's a former City of Waverley councillor and mayor, I think from 1984. David, is that correct? So welcome. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay. So, Council, we have no apologies tonight. Do we have any disclosure of interest and conflict of interest?
Yes.
Councillor Choi?
Thank you, Mayor. For item 9.1, I'm the staff of the corresponding institute, so would like to decline conflict of interest.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else? No? Any need confirmation of minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 27th of March 2018? Do we have a mover? Councillor James, Councillor Little seconded. Any discussions or questions on those minutes? No, we'll go to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried. Reception and reading of petitions, joint letters and memorials. Do we have any, Council? Yes, Councillor Zagrafos.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It gives me sadness to speak about the life of Noel McMahon, who was a resident of the City of Monash, living in Hughesdale for some years, who passed away on the 9th of April, aged 16 years old. Noel McMahon was a young man who was wise beyond his years, very mature, and dedicated to his community, the City of Monash, where he attended many council meetings in the last 18 or so months, sat in the gallery. Initially, he was concerned about the Skyrail issue, living in a part of Hughesdale that adjoins the train line, and that encouraged him to be active in that particular debate and campaign. Unfortunately, there was some personal problems, and that is something that is too prevalent in our young community across the City of Monash and this country. But I do extend my condolences to Noel McMahon's parents, Brian and Angela, his siblings, Charlotte and Maxwell. And I was grateful to know Noah, someone who at such a young age was willing to represent certain local issues and community groups. In fact, tomorrow is Anzac Day, and last Anzac Day, last year, he accompanied me at the Clayton RSL where I was representing the Mayor to act as sort of my photographer, so to speak, and it's sad that tomorrow morning obviously that won't be the case. So I want to put on record that this person, Noel McMahon, was a very brilliant person, and it's incredibly sad that I put my condolences on the record. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Councillor James.
Thank you, Mayor. And I actually would like to echo your thoughts, Councillor Zagrafis, and I texted you on the day that I heard and passed my condolences on to you then. It's no secret around this table and probably in the community that Noah and I didn't agree on anything. In fact, we were polar opposites and we had many arguments. Having said that, though, I don't believe that anyone should be in the position that he was in or ended up being in, where he felt that he had no other way out. And I think there's a blight in our society that young people of any situation are left in that, and it's something that we champion here at the City of Monash, looking after youth mental health. So my condolences also go out to Noah and his family, and to Councillor Zagrafis, who I know was affected by his death.
Given that SEV has always submitted quarterly reports and has always had funding from multiple sources for its many programs, why does Council think that SEV is not spending Monash Council funds on Monash programs? Council has always been proud of its partnership with SEVs, but can only fund programs that meet the grant's guidelines. The panel could not clearly identify that all the funds being sought by SEVs for the 18-19 funding round were specifically for Monash programs. This was communicated to SEVs on a number of occasions, and a clarification sought ahead of the panel making its determination. The SEVs were given an opportunity to respond, but the panel concerns were not resolved. Unfortunately, there remains elements of the application that do not meet the selection criteria. Thank you, Mr Hawkins, for your question. And we have a further question from Ms Elizabeth Bruce. Ms Bruce, would you like me to read your question? Thank you, Elizabeth. Having already provided documentation to Council and its officers by the CEO of SEV on the 5th, 14th and 21st of February, in addition to the regular quarterly reports and statistics provided, why then does Council believe that the local community is not receiving the benefits of Monash Council funds through South East volunteers? As per my previous response, Council is proud of its long-standing partnership with South East volunteers. However, as with all grant applications, funding is only recommended for programs and activities that meet the strict grants guidelines. While South East volunteers did provide additional information to the grants panel, unfortunately this information did not provide the level of clarity or detail to fully justify the grant allocation in line with previous years, and not all items included in their proposed grant expenditure budget were eligible for funding under the Monash Community Grants Program policy and guidelines. That being said, I wish to assure you that Council remains committed to working in partnership with South East volunteers to ensure that there is clarity going forward. Thank you, Elizabeth. We have 4 parts to a question by Mr Barry Jukes. Mr Jukes, are you in the audience? So, would you like to read your question out, or would you like me to? Yep, just come forward to the mic, please, Mr Jukes.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, for allowing me the opportunity to address the Monash Council this evening with regard to Sydney Blue Gum Tree, which is situated in the nature strip outside our home. There has been some information from Councillor Robert Davies on my behalf, and also some council against the motion. I'd just like to know, why does the Monash Council insist on maintaining a tree that's clearly not suited for a suburban nature strip? Second point is, when a tree can be removed for the cost of $3,000, why does the council want to spend $25,000 on road solutions to maintain the same tree? Number three, I forwarded to the Monash Council documentation from the government bodies showing the Sydney blue gums are not suitable to be located in a nature strip outside my home or any other home. Number four, the Sydney blue gum located outside number 1 Garden Court in Wheelers Hill is dangerous, inappropriate, level of risk to my family and the neighbours and the members of the public. And I'd just like to thank Councillor Robert Davies for his assistance with this matter. Thank you,
Mr. Dukes.
Okay.
So in response to your questions, which are in 4 parts, but the first part you ask is, why do the council insist on maintaining a tree that is clearly not suited to a suburb nature strip? The tree does not currently meet council's criteria for removal, and we believe the risks and nuisance of concern can be mitigated via the proposed solutions. We therefore believe maintaining this tree using all options available is the best outcome for both residents and the environment. Council uses tailored tree management plans to manage trees and their risk to public safety. In this case, we are inspecting the tree twice a year and have engaged independent advice to test our qualified assessments. The benefit of street trees, especially well-established street trees, cannot be underestimated. We need to carefully manage these trees to ensure they continue to provide the many benefits to both community and the environment. When this tree can be removed for the cost of $3,000, why does the council want to spend $25,000 on road solutions to maintain the same tree? Officers have advised that this work is required regardless. However, we have the opportunity to design for the retention of tree if we proceed. A significant component of Council's capital works program is renewal of surface and curb. The tree has a conservative amenity valuation in excess of $80,000. The valuation method used has been tried and tested in a similar format by many other councils over quite a number of years. The value of this tree far exceeds the cost of works and is expected to contribute to the amenity of this area for another 15 to 20 years. And finally, you ask, I have given the Monash Council documentation evidence from government bodies showing Sydney blue gums are not suitable to be located in a nature strip, and that the Sydney blue gum located outside 1 Garden Court, Willis Hill, is clearly dangerous and inappropriate level of risk to my family and neighbours. Council officers are making this assessment on a specific tree in a specific location and, for some of the reasons mentioned, are considering this tree's value and worthiness of retention. It has been previously acknowledged that we do not have this species in our normal street planting program, but it is Council's responsibility to assess each situation individually. If this were not the case, significant amounts of valuable tree loss could be expected across the city. And as you've already pointed out, Mr. Dukes, we have a report tabled by Councillor Davies later on to consider the removal of that tree. I ask you to stay for that debate, and we'll see where that takes us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Council, as we get into the body of our agenda tonight, I just will let those councillors that are using electronic devices that there is an error with the system tonight. So should you wish to pull up papers or documents, you'd have to go to the Monash website. That's correct. Is what my advice is. Okay, so Council will go straight into our agenda tonight. City Development, item 1.1, units at 8 Freda Street, Huntingdale. Do we have a mover? Anyone moving this report? Councillor Fergus, a seconder. Councillor James, is there any discussion? No discussion. We'll go to the vote, Council. All those in favour? It's carried. Thank you. Item 1.2, Eastern Innovation Business Centre. Do we have a mover? Councillor Fergus, seconder. Councillor Patterson. Any discussion? No discussion. We'll go to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried. Item 1.3, Town Planning Schedules. Do we have a mover, Council? Councillor James. Councillor Lake was seconded. Any discussion? No discussion. We'll go to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried. Thank you. Community Development and Services, item 2.1, restructuring the previous Ethnic Seniors Forum to the Ageing Forum. Do we have a mover for this, Council? Councillor Lake, second to Councillor Patterson. Any discussion? No discussion, Council. We'll go to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried. Thank you. 2.2, INE Ally Oceania Scholarship, International Travel. Do we have a mover? Councillor Patterson, a second to Councillor James. Any discussion, Council? No discussion. We'll go to the vote. Yes? Sorry, Councillor Patterson.
I just quickly wanted to congratulate our staff member, Pamela McGowan, for her receipt of this scholarship. She's a fantastic librarian. I think anyone who comes into contact with her will, be able to catch her enthusiasm about libraries and information, and making sure everyone has access to all the information that's out there. She's a fantastic member of our library staff, and it's great to see her recognised through this scholarship.
Any other comments, Council? Okay, we'll go to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried. Item 2.3, Geneva Car Park Level 1 Community Infrastructure Project. Do we have a mover? Councillor Lake, a seconder. Councillor James, is there any discussion? No? Yes, Councillor Davies?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I simply cannot support this this project for a number of reasons. First of all, I don't agree that we need to sell the land that's here. If a project is going to stack up, it's got to stack up on its own right. You don't do a project on the basis that you have funds to sell, and so I don't agree that we should be selling the land. In addition, I think this project has very poor returns. In fact, we're probably double or triple paying for the development of this site. So the development costs look to me to be way too high. But in addition, we have to pay to replace the car parking that's there. So we're looking at paying way over what would normally be paid for a project of this sort. And in addition, we've already got the building structure there. So the costs of doing this are just astronomical. It doesn't make sense from a financial perspective. It makes far more sense to rent. So if we wanted to rent the current space that we're actually building, over 10 years it would cost us probably $1.4 million based on the space that's being built, and the project is way in excess of that. So this. Again, from a financial perspective, it doesn't make sense. The synergies that we're going to get from this can in no way recompense or close the gap between what we're paying versus a rental decision. So I think it would make far more sense to rent. We haven't been presented with that option, but I think we should be. We need to be able to make a decision on best value, and this just simply does not present best value. So, one, I don't agree with the sale of the land. Two, the costs of the project are astronomical. Not only the building costs, but the replacing the car parks is very expensive. So if we built somewhere else, we wouldn't have to replace car parks. So I can't see that makes sense. And replacing 20-odd car parks at $45,000 per spot can add up to a lot of money. The third reason that I don't support this is we've currently submitted a request to the Essential Services Commission for relief on or to charge more on rates. Yet here we are saying that we're going to build an astronomically cost business, and we've got land to sell. And so if we have land to sell, we can't be going to the Essential Services Commission and say, look, we've got no money. We need to charge more in rates. Well, if we have land to sell, well, then clearly we should be going to the Essential Services Commission. And
thank you, Councillor.
So I'd just like to request an additional 2 minutes.
Someone to second that? Councillor James, all those in favour? Okay. All those against? Okay. Floor is yours.
So if we're going to the Essential Services Commission and saying we need to raise rates because we don't have any way of covering this cost that's happened with the waste, well then, if we have land to sell, well, they could come back to us and just say, well, sorry, no, you can't raise your rates, just sell your land, and that'll cover the extra cost for 5 years or 6 years or whatever it is. So I think it's a bad look all around. One is the project doesn't make sense in its own right. We're selling land. It's also a bad look to the Essential Services Commission, who we're applying for relief from. And even if the Essential Services Commission knocks us back on our request, we still have to go to the residents and say, all right, well, now we need to increase your rates, or we're going to charge you for rubbish. Well, if we have land to sell, why not sell it and keep rates low? So I just think this is a bad project across the board. It doesn't make sense financially, operationally, strategically, and so I will not be supporting it. Thank you.
Any other comments, Council? Councillor James.
Mayor, just before I speak, do you mind if I stay seated?
Yes, you did tell me of your injury, Councillor, so yes.
Thank you. Just quickly, I've already spoken previously in support of this, and I will support it again tonight. I just want to refute Councillor Davies' assertions that if we pass this, we suddenly find ourselves on foul of the ESC, ECS, whichever acronym. Thank you very much. We're about to pass a budget tonight of $190 million, of which includes $2 or $3 million of discretionary funding. A lot of it in Councillor Davies' ward. So if we're looking to cut costs, I'm sure we could stop people picking up people's rubbish at all, or doing things like that out of our budget. I don't really think that that's an argument that we can use in this circumstance. This is a good project, and yes, it would be ideal not to sell land. I'm one of the biggest proponents against selling land. However, officer advice is that these pieces of land are surplus to our needs and cost more to maintain or upkeep than would otherwise be required. So this project, in my view, does stack up, and I'm fully supportive of it.
Councillor Salimi.
First of all, I want to say I don't have a problem with co-location of services, so I'll put that one right out there. I do have a problem with this project because even though they might say, people around the table who support it, we've been doing this for years and years and years, well, it's time to start looking at what's happening in Melbourne now. We've got 400 people coming into Melbourne every single day. I just heard on the news tonight. We've got the Glen now that are now charging for car parking. We have now changed the Univa car park to be 5 hours now. I parked there and went into the city last Thursday, and I was able to do that within 5 hours. The people that are working in Glen Waverley that are part-timers or they're working in the evening, they are now for the first time ever using Univa car park, and all of these car parks were being used. And why would we now, in 2017-18, turn around and say, oh, whoops, now we're going to put some offices in on the first floor, and we're going to sell off one property that's 853 square metres right near the station, which is Wavecare. And then we're also going to sell 14 Bogong, which is right opposite a car park, opposite Centrelink, within 150 metres of the Civic Centre here, and is 745 square metres. Why would we sell 1,600 square metres of fantastic, valuable land that can have 4 stories on it and go and put in a little box inside a car park where it's extremely hard to do that turn from first to second level, from the ground floor up. In fact, I've got a Corolla and I nearly hit a car, and I'm a damn good driver. And there's no way in the world that it's going to be a simple thing for someone who's got a larger vehicle. The vans won't go up to that first floor. An ambulance will not go up to that first floor. An ambulance is 2.6 metres high, and we can have a bar there at 2.2 metres. And to replace 26 car parks at around $45,000 per car park is well into over around $1 million, and that is just insane since we've already got the car parks. And we've got a building that is at 14 Bogong that could be used and rented out if you needed to. You could build on the Wavecare site, you could do 4 stories, you could have even everything in there and rent out 1 or 2 stories. So there's absolutely no sense whatsoever in building into a car park when you've got 2 damn good properties. And we're growing. Why would we sell 2 fantastic assets in Glen Waverley when we know that we're going to need them? And by the way, 155 Coleman's got 2 crossovers, so it's an extremely handy site, and it's opposite a car park right near the railway station. So I think anyone who supports this is financially inept. Thank you.
Any other comments, Council? Yeah, Councillor Lake.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I suppose I'm one of the financially inept people who support this project, and I do it for essentially 3 reasons. The first reason is that this produces a facility the like that we don't have at the moment when it comes to the services that are currently provided out of the 3 locations that are going to be co-located at the Geneva car park into the future if this project is supported. So Wavecare Counselling Services, which is an organisation that for many years has provided essential services into the Glen Waverley and wider community. Monash Youth Services, which serves the whole of the city of Monash and adjoining areas as well, and has always delivered great services to young people and families in Monash. And of course the Maternal and Child Health Service that currently is located down at Kerry Road, at Boyana Road in Glen Waverley, moving the essential services that it provides to young families, to newborn babies. And the advantage, of course, Mayor, is that you have all of these services being provided out of a much bigger, a more modern and a more purpose-built facility, and one that combines with the existing significant premises that's already in the car park, which relates to Monash Link, the main community health service that services an area across all of Monash, but increasingly beyond the Monash boundary. So it's a really significant project. So it stacks up on that basis. A few people have alluded in comments before me to the financial implications of this project. Well, it stacks up on that basis as well. This is going to produce a net return to council, a surplus, and it makes sense. The cost to council of continuing to fund 2 ageing facilities as they currently exist, the 2 pieces of land that are slated for sale if this proposal goes through, to remove the obligation that we will have and that we currently have to fix up and to rejuvenate those 2 ageing pieces of infrastructure, that's good for the whole community. And we're talking about 2 house blocks. We're not talking about significant pieces of land. We're talking about 2 house blocks which, for the sake of historical anomaly, have been in council's hands and have been used as substandard facilities for key community services. We're going to locate them properly in an innovative facility at Geneva with Monash Link. It's going to be a win-win for all of the service recipients from those organisations, plus those that use Monash Link, and that's why this project stacks up. And thirdly, Mayor, this project is innovative. It's been worked on by council for about 3 years. It deserves to be supported.
Any other comments, Council, before we go? Councillor Fergus.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got roughly the same things to say about this project as I've said previously, and that is that I support items 1 to 3 here, but not 4 to 8, which talk about the land sale components. I partially agree with Councillor Davies and Councillor Salumi, and I partially agree with Councillor Lake. I think this is a worthwhile project in terms of co-location, in terms of community infrastructure. However, everyone around this table is well aware that I'm not a proponent of our current model of funding community infrastructure. I think we have, and I'll discuss this again later when we talk about the draft budget, but we have too much of a focus on our active recreation infrastructure and not enough on infrastructure which supports those most vulnerable members of our community, like the infrastructure we're talking about here. I think it would be a great shame if this project didn't happen, but I can't in good conscience support the land sale components of this. I think there are other ways to fund projects such as this without losing valuable assets. I recognise the argument put forward by officers and Councillor Lake that there are some aspects to maintaining those facilities. I think we could be a little bit more proactive and strategic in how we think about how we manage those facilities, whether we look at other uses for those, if we look at leasing options. I think there are a range of things which we haven't yet canvassed in this current council, maybe you have before. but they're not conversations which I've been privy to date. So I commend the officers on their work on the project and also all the staff and services involved with getting to this point, because getting that agreement I think is a great achievement, Julie, and I know your team have done a lot of work on that. So my statement this evening and my vote is no reflection on, I don't want to diminish that work. I really appreciate it, and I think it's going to end up hopefully as an excellent result. But I think that aspect, and councillors, that's on us, how we are looking at funding our community infrastructure or failing to fund our community infrastructure compared to our active recreation infrastructure, in my view, is something that I think we desperately need to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments before we go to the vote on this matter? Okay, we'll go to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's 5. So it's
Just get a division on that, Mayor.
yeah. All those in favour? Councillor Little, Councillor Patterson, Councillor James, McCluskey, Councillor Classaris, Councillor James, Councillor Lake. All those against? Councillor Salumi, Councillor Fergus, Councillor Zagrafos, Councillor Choi, Councillor Davis. Thank you. That's carried. Okay. Moving along to corporate services, item 3.1, proposed annual budget 2018-19, incorporating the strategic resource plan. Mover for that, Councillor James. Seconder, Councillor Lake. Any discussion?
I'd like to propose an amendment.
Yes, Councillor Zagrafos.
Thank you. I'd like to propose an amendment that adds a point 11 with the following wording: that Council further allocates $100,000 from the Development Fund to plan, consult and construct 31 new car parking spaces in Clapham Road, Hughesdale, and that all necessary edits be made to the attached draft budget document.
Do you have a seconder for that? Councillor Davies? Is the mover of the... No, they're not happy, so Councillor Zagrafos will deal with that amendment. Is there a copy of the amendment for all
I've
the
just
colleagues?
emailed it to all councillors, but I can read it again, and that is that Council further allocates $100,000 from the Development Fund to plan, consult and construct 31 new car parking spaces in Clapham Road. That should read Clapham Road, Hughesdale, and that all necessary edits be made to the attached draft budget document. Okay, so should I speak to this?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. This is a budget bid that I had proposed earlier this year to the Council through its draft budget planning process, and I don't believe it's been decided upon either way by the Council before the draft budget was presented to this Council meeting. So I'm forced to place it as an amendment in this Council meeting. By way of background, Clapham Road, Hughesdale currently has car parking spaces already in Clapham Road, but due to parking constraints there is a need for 31 new spaces to be built. Clapham Road incorporates Oakley Grammar, which is on Clapham Road, and also the Oakley Greek Orthodox Church, which is also on Clapham Road, including a number of local residents. And I'm advised that the facilities within Oakley Grammar, which include a gymnasium, basketball courts and other facilities, are used by the following local organisations: the Aurora Calisthenics College, the Melbourne Tigers Junior Basketball Club, the Play Ball Basketball, Shalom Association Incorporated, Weight Watchers Group, and of course the parishioners of the Greek Orthodox Church, students of the after-school Greek classes on Saturdays, and of course their parents, and other teachers, staff as well. So it appears that since 2015 this has been a proposal for consideration, and the Council has met with representatives of Oakley Grammar in 2015, and I'm advised a number of times since then, where the Oakley Grammar has asked for a consideration of funding these car parking spaces to be constructed to the tune of $200,000, which would pay for 31 new spaces. I brought a budget bid because nothing has happened in 3 years, and I was hopeful that Council would support it. In good faith, I requested a survey to be completed by Council officers to determine how many vehicles are using these facilities, parking in the area, at certain times that was proposed to look at, and I wanted to see that raw data so council can actually consider it before it makes a decision, and also to go through these organisations and to see how many of them are local residents and ratepayers. I still haven't received that data or that information, so I still believe that this is a very worthwhile project. Now, because it's going to be used by the community, the members of the public and residents, I'm proposing a 50-50 split, so I'm requesting $100,000 as is in the amendment. I look forward to having a discussion about this proposal. Thank you.
Any comments on the amendment? Yes.
Mayor, I have a case of deja vu because I reckon it was 12 months ago in this chamber where I spoke out against amending a draft budget in this chamber at the last minute. I would anticipate that Councillor Zagrafis and perhaps some other councillors here will make a series of amendments tonight, and as I did last year, I will not support any of them. And I'll not support any of them, not because I don't think they're worthy projects, because I believe that some of the ones that Councillor Zagrafis is mentioning tonight are very worthy projects. But I don't believe that after 6 months of negotiations between everyone at this table, and possibly some others that aren't here tonight, where we have debated the merits of all the discretionary budget items and come to this position as a collective of 11 people that we should be changing a budget on the fly willy-nilly in the chamber. We talk about fiscal responsibility and Councillor Davies talks about stacking up in the numbers and being financially responsible. It is my opinion that to sit here and change the budget at the drop of a hat is the definition of bad financial management, and I will not support it, nor will I ever support it in this chamber. I will just quickly add whatever point I was thinking of when I was going to add that point, but I've now forgotten, so I'll leave it there. Thank you, Mayor.
Any other comments? Councillor Lee.
Thanks, Mayor. I also don't support this amendment, and I think it's thoroughly unnecessary, and I refer to a memo to councillors from James Patterson, who's Councillors Manager Engineering, that he sent around on the 16th of April. And the advice that he provided then, and one of the recipients of the memo was Councillor Zagrafis, directly contradicts matters that Councillor Zagrafis has claimed or put forward in his comments earlier. So, first of all, James Patterson explains that I think he, along with you, Mayor, met with school officials on the 19th of February this year and reaffirmed the position put forward by council officers previously that council would not contribute to the construction cost but would allow the indented parking to occur, and that we were prepared to manage the design and construction of additional indented parking in the precinct at our cost. So that's something that doesn't require separate provision in the budget. That's a standing offer. So the estimated cost that was given to Oakley Grammar back more than 2 years ago now, in fact it was June 2016, was that construction would cost around about $200,000, which I think is the figure Councillor Zagrafis is basing on a 50-50 contribution of $100,000 being based upon. And that was to fund an estimated 31 spaces subject to possible service location issues. Now, in this meeting that you had, James Patterson advises that school officials indicated that they believed additional parking was required for community use, the use that Councillor Zagrafis referred to earlier. Now, because of that, Council went and arranged the surveys that Councillor Zagrafis says that he hasn't had any advice back on, and the surveys were conducted on Wednesday the 7th and Thursday the 8th of March, which were two of the nights suggested by the school in order to quantify their claim that there is a demand created by these external users or community users. Now, this is the advice from James Patterson. The survey showed that the parking associated with the community use was minor, with parking easily contained in the existing parking areas. The majority of the parked cars in the street appeared to belong to residents, with most parked on the residential side. Based on the traffic surveys, there was no justification for council to contribute towards additional parking, and the school was advised of this. Now, since the school, according to James Patterson, has responded on the 22nd of March 2018 indicating that the school now wishes to fund the car park project in Clapham Road. So the school is actually saying to our community and to council it will fund the $200,000. So what on earth are we doing considering this amendment now?
Any other comments, council, before we put the amendment to the yes?
Yeah, I just like to echo what Councillor Lake said. I know that Councillor Zagrafis loves this school. Of course, he went there and was a school captain, and this school is really important to him. I went out and visited the school last year as mayor and discussed this project with them. The project, of course, has merit. The school needs more car parking. There's absolutely no doubt about that. The school has grown exponentially ever since they made the decision to, become a secondary school as well as to have early learning centre on the site, and that is going from just a primary school to go to a school that has that's open to everyone rather than just Greek students. So the school has grown absolutely enormously, and they've swallowed up all the parking that was on the grounds, and it now means all that car parking has been forced out into the street. They absolutely need to do something about the car parking, but as we can see from that memo, they've committed to do that project and spend their own money. I don't understand why any councillor would support council spending money when we've got a school who the parking is for completely willing to pick up the bill for the car parking that they need for their own school.
Any other comments, council, before we vote on the amendment? Yes, councillor Davies.
So, thank you, Mayor. I'll just make a couple of comments. I wasn't aware that James Patterson had been promoted to mayor and he was making decisions for council. It's interesting. I think it is up to council to make decisions. It's not up to council officers to do it and to negotiate. So I don't necessarily think that those comments by council officers should be shared. Shared here, and they're not the definitive ruling of council. The council did never consider this budget. This budget bid in discussions. It was put off repeatedly, and it was never considered. There is money available in the development fund for this, and I think doing a 50-50 split for the spending is entirely reasonable. There is school usage for the parking spaces, but there is also community usage for it. The fact or the supposition or whatever it is that the school has committed to paying completely for this, I don't believe it's correct. They may have said, well, we have to pay for ourselves if you're not going to, because that was based on council officers' advice. It wasn't based on a decision of council. So I think there's a miscommunication there. It's not a rule of council. So it's not a decision that the school has made. And we've heard the school does need parking. If the school needs parking, the local residents need parking, then I believe it's a reasonable budget to support it.
Okay. Yes, councillor Fergus.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I took the time as well to go out to the school to speak to them about this issue, to consider it as part of broader consideration of the budget this year. I think we did the right thing by asking officers to go and look into this issue to provide us with some advice. Councillor Davies is quite right. James Patterson is not the mayor, but he was providing advice as he was asked to do. I might take a moment to ask a question, if I may, Mayor, of our Director of Infrastructure, just to reiterate the officer's advice on this issue so we're all very clear as to what that is. I know you're not the Mayor, Ozzy, but please, in your current role, if you could share with us, that would be greatly appreciated.
Through the Chair, based on the surveys and observations on site, the parking is generated by the school, and that's been advice that while the school had alleged there was a greater community use, we did the surveys at times that they suggested, and we were able to observe that there was very minimal community use parking. So the main parking problems are generated by the school. They acknowledge that, they understand that, and our discussions with them has been about funding it. But as part of the give from council, if you like, the contribution from council is we're allowing them to build the car park within the road reserve, will manage the construction and the project management as well. So that's part of our give to the solution, I guess.
Yep, you have it. Okay. No other comments, Council? Okay, we'll put the recommended amendment to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? Okay, you're abstaining. Councillor Salumi is abstaining. All those in favour? Councillor Davies, Councillor Choi, Councillor Zagrafos. Against? Councillor Little, Councillor Fergus, Councillor Patterson, Councillor McCluskey, myself, Councillor James, Councillor Lake. We now return back to the substantive motion that's before us. We've had a mover and a seconder. Is there any discussion on this report? Yep, Councillor Fergus.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, that project, as Councillor Patterson said, I think that project isn't a project without merit, and there are many projects that have a great deal of merit that are not getting funded tonight. So that previous vote, at least personally, is not a reflection on my view that may or may not be something worth doing at some point, resources allowing. I have mixed feelings about this budget, partially for that reason. I do feel, though, that our process, councillors, has been particularly poor this year, and I've said this I've said this to all of you at different occasions. I think we've focused on a small portion of the budgetary allocations to the neglect of some broader strategic work, which I really hope we can get to next year. And some of that involves projects such as thinking about our community infrastructure and how we fund that, which I mentioned earlier. I think also our service and performance indicators we're talking about as part of this document don't particularly align well with our initiatives that we're putting forward. And I think officers have done the heavy lifting with this budget, and I really thank them for this, but I think we've let the team down as councillors a little bit. We haven't spoken about our council plan in relation to this budget, the excellent vision and worthy goals we put in our council plan last year. And we as a group have not discussed this aspect of the document. We haven't discussed the service and performance indicators. We haven't discussed how we're going to hold ourselves to account over the course of this year. We've left that to officers, and they've done a good job, but I think we let the team down. We've spent our time discussing our pet councillor projects, and that includes mine. Absolutely, it's true. And we haven't ensured that we have a document which will deliver the next year of our council plan, in my view. In the future, I'd really like to see a range of things, as well as hopefully an improved process for next year, which I'm communicated to a number of you. I'm very happy to work on and work with anyone who's willing to work with me on that to ensure we're not in a similar position at this time next year. But I would in particular like to see some things considered, like an indexation of our pensioner rate rebate to ensure that maintains its value over the years, a reduction in the amount we spend on sporting pavilion renewal in order to redirect much needed funds to other community infrastructure, particularly that which is supporting our most vulnerable residents. We also have in this budget, in my view, insufficient funding for the expansion of our passive open spaces, action on climate change, key elements of pedestrian infrastructure, which we said in our council plan were key things that we wanted to do, and yet I don't believe we're funding them as we should be this year. There are a good number of project bids from officers and councillors alike in these areas, which we've chosen not to fund, and I hope we review that next year and we think about our strategic priorities we've set ourselves and really try and think long term. I'd also like to have a discussion at some point, and I'll be raising this in the future, about involving our residents more in budgeting. That said, I will support the budget. It's a joint budget we've come to, and I won't be rocking the boat any further.
Any other comment? Yes, Councillor James.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. And I tend to echo part of what Councillor Fergus is saying. I think that last year, well, particularly Councillor Fergus and I were new councillors, and we came into a budget process almost at day one that we had absolutely no idea what we were doing and how it worked. I think another councillor around this table made the comment to me earlier in the week that last year, unusually, everyone managed to get a successful budget bid through, and that in that councillor's historical experience, that was a very unusual thing to happen. I think this year it didn't seem like we had a process, in my view, that was succinct and something that followed on. It seemed that each week we'd come back and we'd re-argue the point that we'd already argued the previous week, and we'd undo a decision we already did. And I think that Councillor Fergus raises some very, very good points on changing the process, and I know we've had some initial discussions and I'd like to work further with you on that, as I hope the rest of my colleagues around the table will do. I'd like to make a comment perhaps on something that Councillor Fergus referred to earlier in the night about funding the disadvantaged and the vulnerable in our community, and sort of made the reference that sport doesn't do that. And I don't want to put words in Councillor Fergus's mouth, but I spend a lot of time at sporting organisations, as I know Councillor McCluskey does as well. These sporting organisations are not middle-class, white privileged people going and playing football on the weekend, although there may be some that fit into that category. There are a lot of people there that are drug addicts. They have parents that are drug addicts. They live on the street. They've dropped out of high school. They don't have any family that supports them. And the football club or the netball club or wherever it is they go to is their family. That is where they go and belong somewhere and have people that understand it are their friends. And they are times of the week that these people look forward to going and being part of something. Whether they're any good at sports, largely irrelevant. I met a young person the other day that walked into a football club who has cerebral palsy. Can't play football, obviously, but he loves going down to that club, talking to people there, and they're his mates. That's his outlet for the week. So I think that, yes, we need to look after disadvantaged and vulnerable, but I don't think we can separate that from being part of sport. I think sport encompasses those people as well. And I acknowledge that not every single disadvantaged or vulnerable person plays sport because it's not their thing. So, yes, I agree we need to do that. But I wanted to highlight that for some reason funding sport isn't dealing with that, because I think that is a big part of why we do fund sport and why it's so important to the city.
And yes, Councillor Salini.
Thank you, Mayor. I wasn't going to actually talk about the budget, but I will now, because Councillor James said that every council last year got a budget bid through, and I didn't. So I'm going to talk. This year I have got the men's shed budget bid through. Thank you very much to our council officer, Julie Solomon, and her team. Apart from that, though, I had wanted to do a forecast of what the population was going to be in Glen Waverley and to look at whether we would have adequate open space in the area, and that did not pass. I'm very upset about that. I also wanted to look at a park and ride shuttle situation so that we could take away a lot of the parking from the neighbourhood streets that are abutting the activity centres and within the activity centres, because we are constantly getting complaints from people who are living very close to railway lines, and I think it's even in the paper, possibly even the front page of the local paper in Jordanville, where we're constantly getting a comment from someone in Fitzroy Grove, I think it is. We have people that can hardly get their cars through Glen Road, Mount Street, all these different places. They can't park and go to their activities. So we need to have some serious discussion about off-site parking and some bus shuttles that are frequent, because we are getting inundated from people from other shires. So we're dealing with people from Whitehorse and from Knox, as well as our own Monash. And the other thing is, I still want to reiterate, I'd still like to do a forecast, given the fact that on the news, as I pulled in my car this afternoon, they were talking about 400 people a day coming into Melbourne and 350 cars a day increase. And we can see it around here with what's happening around the Glen. So I think we need to go back to our core business. We are constantly getting complaints about drainage. We need to look at footpaths and maybe not go off into tangents for things that are probably better used by, probably supplied by state and federal government, and to stop the politics in this council. Thank you.
Any other comments? Councillor Little.
I'm astonished a little bit at all the negativity that's going on around this table at the moment. The budget is an astonishingly difficult process, and it takes months and months and months. The most astonishing level of hard work on our finance officers and every aspect of council. To have reached at this point where we were spending almost $190 million, we're in a rate-capped environment where being limited to 2.2% increase, where we see our costs going up by significantly more than that, it is a process of compromise. At the end of, well, at the beginning of the process, we only had something like less than $3 million, which was regarded as discretionary. That's money that councillors could possibly bid a project for. We had 200 projects which we could have spent. We could have spent that money 10 times over. Of that slightly less than $3 million, we managed to get, I think, 24 or 25 projects up. Some councillors I can see are quite disappointed that their particular projects did not make it. I think we all had projects that didn't make it. It doesn't take away from the fact that the budget is an extraordinary piece of work, and it's highly, highly commendable. But I do want to pick up Councillor Fergus on one point. On our draft budget on page 7, there is a breakdown of all the different costs. Now, he talks about an emphasis on sport. And I think he gets that impression because of those discretionary projects, a lot of them were in fact sport-based. And that is because councillors get quite heavily involved and active with the sporting groups around Monash. But just to put this in perspective, we spend, let's see if I can get the figures here. Well, recreation and aquatic centres is just 7%. Whereas we spend, far more, like buildings, footpaths and drainage, we spend 11%. Waste collection and street and public is 12%. Property and maintenance is 20%. Local law, school crossings and food inspections is 5%. So back to that recreation and aquatic centre, 7%. Parks, gardens and sports ground is 7%. So really, if you actually look at the figures and the percentages, I honestly don't think Councillor Fergus's description of being overly focused on sporting facilities is actually mathematically true. I highly, highly commend this budget. It was an enormous amount of hard work. It was a lot of compromise on a lot of people's part, but I do commend it to Council.
Any other comments, Council, before we go to the vote? Councillor Davies.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just make a few comments as well. So, just in the Mulgrave ward, there's two reasonably large projects. The lights at Freeway Reserve, which are in there, which has got some contribution from the local sports team as well towards the project. This will more or less bring to an end the Freeway Reserve Master Plan, which I know you championed a few years ago, Mayor. So it has taken a few years to get all the aspects of the Freeway Reserve Master Plan done, but it's fantastic that we're now getting near the end of that. So I think that's a great result. There's also a pavilion at the Brentwood Reserve, which I know Councillor McCluskey championed, but that's a great initiative as well. I think we've moved that forward 1 year, so that's great to have that. Just with regard to Councillor Fergus's comments, more than happy to work with Councillor Fergus on coming up with some new process. I agree. I think we spend far too much time on our discretionary aspects of the budget, which at the end of the day makes up less than 5% of spending. So I think that process needs to be streamlined, and we need to be focusing across the board on expenditure as well. So I think there's certainly some ideas I have, and I'm more than happy to sit down and have a think tank on it. However, I'd also flag that investment in sporting infrastructure is one of the things that I believe our community is hanging out for. This is where families spend their time. It brings community together. It's non-denominational in the sense that people from all different types of communities come together to play sports. So it builds community cohesion. It builds a stronger community, and it builds a stronger community, especially for families and young kids. So I think it's an area that we should be supporting, and I'll certainly be encouraging it in the future. However, back on the actual budget, I did want to just point out a couple of metrics here. We have the lowest, or near the lowest, I think. I'm not sure we're at the lowest anymore, but we're near the lowest rates in metropolitan Melbourne. We have a $16 million surplus, which is just absolutely fantastic, that we can run a surplus. Now, a lot of that surplus that we have, which is bigger than many listed companies, a lot of that surplus is used up by our capital investment. And the capital investment we have this year is $46 million. Next year it's $71 million, which I think is an impact from the Oakley Recreation Center investment, which is coming next year. So this level of investment is unprecedented, and we have the lowest rates. So it's a fantastic result and a fantastic budget.
Thank you. Councillor McCluskey.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor, just very briefly, I won't be so melancholy about the process so much and the result, because I agree with largely what Councillor Little has said. I think it's a great budget for the most part. I do agree with Councillor Fergus, though. I'm one of the many that thinks we could probably do it better. I don't think it was an atrocious mess at all. I just think it's a difficult process by nature of what it is. But I do think there's better ways we can do it in a more expedient way, and perhaps a better way of using our time as well as resident ratepayers' money. But I will make the point that I think it's been picked up before, that a lot of what we are spending money on now is because we're behind the eight ball in those areas. We've proudly almost boasted that we're the lowest rated council for a long time and all that sort of stuff. So, but that's all great. But what that means is we've got less money than most other councils. And that doesn't mean we have any less need. We have, in fact, more need than a lot of other councils that charge higher rates than we do. Rate capping comes in and our hands are effectively tied. Unexpected things bob up. No one expected the recycling issue to go the way it did, and from a cost positive to a cost neutral for council over however many years that's going to be, and that's still unknown largely. So with those unknowns and some projects that went bigger than what they were going to be, like Oak Recreation Centre, I think we all agree is going to be an outstanding facility and probably a country best facility, specifically when we're referring to the Waverley Gymnastics. There's not a better facility in the country once that's built. We're doing all that in large part on a shoestring. I take Councillor Fergus's point that there's probably a slant to recreation in this budget, but we're already behind the eight ball, as I said, and I have no qualms in trying to improve a facility where an 8 or 10-year-old girl needs to go and get changed to play a sport or do a dancing in a male urinal. To me, that's getting back to basics. Fixing that is what we're about. That to me is far more important, far more pivotal to our existence as a council than some of the peripheral projects we get involved in that we've all agreed around this table at various times belong in state and federal arenas. Yes, we advocate, and yes, we should. Headspace is a great example. That impacts directly on our youngest, most vulnerable people. But it's a balance I think we've got to get right. And I think this budget, whilst it's not perfect, doesn't deliver everything for everybody, I think goes a long way to at least starting that process, and I think that's what we're about. I'm happy to support the budget in its current form.
Any other comments, Council, before we go to the vote? Okay, I might just quickly say a few words while time permits. I'm extremely proud of what we're presenting to our community that will go out shortly, once adopted tonight, hopefully, for consultation. As all my colleagues around this table have said, the budget process is not an easy process to go through, but it nevertheless is a very exciting time. It's a process that starts back in October and concludes with a meeting tonight. When I say concludes, it goes to the next step after tonight. In between all those months, we had a curveball thrown at us, and our deputy alluded to it, and that was the waste charge and what that meant for our spend and the budget in totality. So we had to make some tough decisions, and everyone around this table are champions of their community and championed as hard as they could for things that they believed their community were crying out for. And some of us were left disappointed, but that's okay. Because we know that we did the best we could, we advocated, we argued the point, and we landed where we landed. But in the whole, this is a great outcome, and we're very proud. And I'm, as Mayor, make no apology of the spend that we put into social infrastructure, which morphs into recreation centres and pavilions and community centres. Great achievements. Councillor McCluskey, our deputy, spoke about, the stigma of being the lowest rating council in Victoria. Again, very proud of that. And look what we've achieved in the 18 odd years that I, with Councillor Lake, have been involved in this council and some of the colleagues around this table. We are very proud. We are the envy of local government. They look at Monash and they wonder how we do it. Yet we do it, and we do it very well. I want to commend Danny Wade, our CFO, led by Danny, Ross, and the men and women that fall underneath you, Danny, to put this together for us and work with us and put up with our, with our fits and our, tantrums when they do materialise. But that's okay too, because that's part of the process, part of the banter. But at the end of the day, we get it right and we do it very well. I commend the report. I look forward to receiving the feedback from the community, and I know that when we land where we land back in June, when we finally adopt the budget, it will be a great outcome for everyone in our city. Okay, we'll go to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried. Thank you. Moving along, infrastructure. 4.1, use of Galbally Reserve for level crossing removal project. Do we have a mover? Councillor Fergus, Councillor McCluskey, seconded. Any discussion? Yes, Councillor Zagrafis.
Thank you. There are a number of concerns that I have within this report. Firstly, I'm perplexed as to the timing of this report. It talks about the use of this reserve being from the 16th of April 2018, and now we're at the end of our meeting cycle, and this, in my view, this should have been on our table at least 3 months ago. That way there would have been enough time to consult with local residents who live near Galbally Reserve, first and foremost, and then the rest of the community. So that's the first point I want to make. The second point is that there are a number of trees, mature trees, that have already been removed from Galbally Reserve, and I couldn't find any information that says how many of those trees have been removed and how many will be replaced by mature trees. So I think the priority for me at this point is to preserve as many mature trees as possible, and to state my concern that a number of trees have been removed without any pre-warning to the community. Now, I'm advised that those trees are on state government land that have been removed, so Galbally Reserve is, as you can see in the diagrams, it's partitioned, so to speak, via a border that, an imaginary border that is partly council land and then partly state government land as part of the train reserve or the corridor. So I think the community has really been ignored in regards to how Galbally Reserve has been managed as part of the level crossing removal project or the Sky Rail project. And that's something that I foreshadowed about 2 years ago. I actually stood at Galbally Reserve and said that this sort of stuff would happen, partly because of the rushed process that the LXRA has taken in this particular project, and partly because of a lack of real planning, because again, there's been no consultation with local stakeholders. So I don't believe that $150,000 is enough to compensate for the trees that have already been removed, let alone the ones that will be proposed to be removed. There's a report later on in the agenda that values a tree at $80,000. So 2 trees alone come close to 150, let alone the dozens of trees that have already been removed. And that has an impact on amenity in those that use Galbally Reserve, which has a walk pathway through it. Obviously at the moment there's a construction site very close to it. So at the moment, as this currently stands, I won't be supporting the report.
Thank you,
I hope that Council considers not supporting.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Fergus.
I acknowledge Councillor Zagrafis's comments, but I think this represents a great outcome for the community. We get $150,000 that doesn't have to come out of the budget we just passed. We get to renew this space to the tune of $150,000 at least a year, possibly 18 months earlier than we'd be able to deliver it. And I think that's a great result. We're going to get a better product and better use for a very small amount of hassle, I think. And I think this is an excellent deal. I don't see why we would be against it.
Any other comments before we go to the vote, Council? Okay.
I'd just like to ask a question, if I may. Or 2 questions?
No, you can't. Sorry, no. You've spoken. Thank you. Okay, we'll go to the vote. All those in favour? Against? That is carried. Thank you. All those in favour? Councillor Saloom, Councillor Little, Councillor Fergus, Councillor Patterson, Councillor McCluskey, myself, Councillor James, Councillor Choi, Councillor Lake, no, those against, Councillor Zagrafos and Councillor Davies. Thank you. Item 4.2, no right turn from Churchill Avenue into Huntingdale Road, Chatston. Councillor James will move it. Seconder, Councillor Little. Any discussion? Yes? Yes, Councillor James.
Thank you, Mayor. And this is a result of a meeting that I had with a resident almost 12 months ago that is concerned about the development at the end of Adrian Street, which was some 30 or 40 odd apartments, I can't even remember, just on the side of Monash Freeway there. Because of the increase in traffic, he was concerned that sometimes he has to wait up to 10 to 15 minutes to turn left out of Churchill Avenue because there's a one car turning right. Hillcrest Avenue is about 2 houses down a little bit further, so the discussion with engineering was that we put a no right-hand turn in Churchill Avenue to allow people to go left and the others can go down to Hillcrest. So it's a great win for the people around that area because it is a very busy area, especially with that development in place. And I wanted to thank the Director of Infrastructure, Aussie, and also James Patterson and the engineering team for their work on this.
Any other comments, Council? Councillor Davies, yes.
I'll just express a concern. I've just looked at the photograph of the area. It looks like Churchill Avenue is a one-lane each-way road. So I understand people want to go right. People go right. It's problematic for those going left because it takes a while. But have we considered widening Churchill Avenue to allow it to fit cars into a turning lane? It looks like there's a fair bit of land there, so I would have thought that might be a better solution for this. If you bar people from going right, then they might go left and then just do U-turns, and then you have people turning all over the road. And I'm not sure that's the optimal solution either. So I just thought it'd be worthwhile to put that forward to say, well, have we considered actually creating a left-hand turn lane?
Okay. Any other comments? No. We'll go to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried. Thank you, Council. Chief Executive Officer's Report, item 5.1, Assembly of Council's Record. I'll move it. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Little. Any discussion? No. We'll go to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried. 5.2, Board Appointment. Do we have a mover? Councillor Fergus, Councillor Little. Happy to seconder. Thank you. Any discussion? Yes, Councillor James.
Just very briefly, I'd just like to congratulate our CEO, Andy Diamond. It's a good appointment and the Sir John's ambulance do a phenomenal amount of work. So I wish you all the best in your appointment there.
Okay. We'll go to the vote then. All those in favour? That is carried. Notice of motion, Council. 6.1, Councillor's Discretionary Expenditure Fund Application. I'll move that. Councillor Patterson will second it. Is there any discussion? No discussion. We'll go to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried. Thank you. 6.2, Amendment to Meeting Procedures Code 2017. Councillor James will move his nom. The second, Councillor Little. Any discussion? No discussion. We'll go to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried. 6.3, Bluestone with the Oakley Activity Centre Precinct. Councillor James will move it. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Little. Any discussion?
Very quickly, Mayor. This comes from a concern from residents, especially those that love the history around Oakley, that bluestones were removed around the base of trees roughly the end of 2016, start of 2017. That was done because the roots were pushing up the bluestones and creating trip hazards and the like. This report basically instructs officers that when they finish the second half of reconstruction Athen Road, that they put back the bluestones along the base of the trees. I've had in-depth discussions with the Director of City Planning and Director of Infrastructure, and they assure me that it can be done, but the bluestones will have to be sunken so that they don't create trip hazard, and there's some issues there with drainage. So this basically instructs officers to put the bluestone back and again to continue to retain the historical character of Oakley Activity Centre by reusing historical materials such as bluestones wherever practical. So I commend this to Council.
Any other comments? No, we'll go to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried. Item 6.4, street removal, One Garden Court, Willis Hill. Councillor Davis will move his nom. Happy to second it. Any discussion? Yeah. Any discussion? Yes, Councillor Davies.
So this was, I guess, flagged earlier, and I'd just like to recognize Barry and Kay Jukes, who live underneath this tree or next to this tree. Everybody loves trees. Big trees are beautiful. I just believe that this tree is problematic and it's inappropriate for a residential area where it is. For many reasons, they're outlined here. I'll just go through them briefly. First of all, this is not a native tree for the local area. It's been planted incorrectly here many years or decades ago. And it's now grown up to a size that is a problem for residents. It is dangerous with branches falling, especially during periods of heavy wind. There's a lot of rubbish that comes down. It requires our residents to clean up after the tree, and I know we can address that in other operational ways, but it does contribute to the overall problems of the tree. There's a major cost to infrastructure here in maintaining this tree, and we've seen in the report here that it could cost $25,000 to keep this tree. I've certainly been out previously in 2013 when Barry first raised this with me, and at the time I said, well, this tree will be addressed as part of our street tree strategy. That strategy changed somewhat, and it would no longer be addressed in the street tree strategy, so I think it's appropriate now to bring it to council to get it addressed. So all things considered, there's a major cost here to infrastructure. It is dangerous. It's not an appropriate tree. The city of Hornsby says this is not an appropriate tree for residential areas. I would like to see this tree gone. I love trees. I love the area. The local area there in Wheelers Hill is just fantastic, but I do support removal of this tree. I think it is problematic. Thank you.
Councillor Butlusky.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. I had the pleasure of meeting Mr Dukes when I was first elected. Seems like a long time ago, I've got to admit, but it's not, but probably 18 months ago, and had a look at the tree, and you're right, Councillor Davis, it's a beautiful tree. There's no denying that. The trouble is it's in the wrong spot, as we've said, and not only is there forecast extra cost in some groundworks being done around the tree and the footpath and the curb and channel, but that discounts what's been done in the past. We've had work done in the past, anyone that visited there, and I've done so 5 times since I first met Mr Dukes, to check on it each time, and to me nothing's changed as far as damage it has done, is doing and will do. So as much as you'd hate to see such a nice species of tree, and I think I made the comment to Mr Dukes when I first met him that this is a beautiful tree, it'd just be great in a park somewhere, we'd love it somewhere in an open space, Gels Park or something like that, but I just, as I've said before, I know I'll be accused of being a tree hater in some sense, but I think we just have to err on the side of amenity, and we're talking before about all the projects we can't implement because there's not enough money. Well, I can't see any point in us further reaching into the not too deep pockets of council in order to keep the footpaths viable, the curb and channel viable, and every other amenity around this area. So, and I'm sure Mr Dukes, as part of this, has agreed to a replacement tree, so we might lose one temporarily, but I think it's worth considering, Council.
Any other comments, Council? Yes, go, and then I'll come to you, Councillor.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. I thank the residents for contacting me. I received 2 or 3 emails, I think, of it. They're going to be disappointed in me, however, because I don't support the removal. I think at the last council meeting, Mayor, you raised a very similar one, and I outlined similar concerns for that. And earlier tonight, I voted to remove a tree that Councillor Salumi put up as well. It's very unusual that I will vote to remove a tree unless it poses what I consider a significant risk to the house itself. Councillor Salumi's instance, the tree was hanging very much right over the bedrooms that people slept in and posed a danger. Yours, Mayor, I think was over the fence, which is similar to where this tree is as well. I acknowledge that residents have concerns. Trees, to me, are probably the second most complaint that I get, other than, of course, the Peters area housing and development. I have complaints from residents that they want trees removed because it drops berries on the footpaths and they don't want to slip over. Trees such as this as well. And I just think that we need to be careful not to set a precedent where we have dozens, hundreds of applications coming to this council to remove trees. Just while we've been in this chamber, all councillors received an email from another resident who I won't mention, and they've outlined a big document there on why we should protect the trees in Monash. And I just might read quickly the summary. As trees on private land keep being removed in Monash, our tree canopy has already been reduced by around half. It seems clear existing council deterrents of unauthorised removal are not working. This is now evidence that substantial tree loss in urban areas may be followed by increased rates of mobility and illness. What are the implications for Monash Council? Some alternative, simple and effective ways to deter tree losses are suggested. And it goes on, and I think that's the crux of the matter for me. What I did see in this report was that officers had recommended to remove a portion of the tree that was overhanging the front of the property, and I think that is probably a better solution to me than removing the entire tree, which the majority of it overhangs the footpath and area. So, for reasons that I didn't support yours in the last meeting, Mayor, I will not support this, and I apologise to the residents who I know this is a concern to you, but they are my reasons for not supporting.
Councillor Salimi.
Thank you. I went out and had another look at the tree this afternoon, and I had seen it previously, and I do believe that it is in good condition, and the fact is that majority of the branches are actually overhanging the street as opposed to private residents. And the fact that the council officers have suggested that they will do 6 monthly inspections, pruning, and contribute to the cost of installing gutter guard and remedial nature strip works. And I've seen it where trees have been on footpaths, and quite frankly, it's unfortunate that there are so many trees and nature strips, I must admit, but you know, there are ways of getting around it, and the tree is, to me, no different to many other trees throughout our municipality. I live in a street that's got a school, and there's just a whole row of gum trees, and I'm always wondering when they're going to come down. But every tree will be likely to lose a limb or a branch in a big storm or a big wind. I mean, that's just the nature of weather and the nature of climate. So I know you're not going to be too happy with me, but to be honest, every tree has capacity to lose a branch, and that tree, it does look like a magnificent specimen, I have to say. And the fact that it is living here doesn't matter to me that it was a Sydney blue gum. It's living very well here, and perhaps it's not as large as if it was in its own Indigenous environment. So apologies, I'm not going to support the removal of the tree, but I will support the council continually doing remedial work and offering you every assistance to get rid of any debris or any rubbish. Thank you.
Councillor Zagrafis.
Thank you. Yeah, look, I'll just make two quick points. First of all, the tree should never have been planted. It's, as councillors have said, it's not native to the area. So I think that's a very key, unique principle. And I'm advised that 2 to 3 canopy trees can be in its place if it was to be removed. So I think that's a pretty good outcome. I think the residents have done the hard work in going through a process to discuss this with their council representatives from the Mulgrave ward, and I think it will be really unfair if the report is lost. And I just want to ask two questions to whoever is the relevant director. In the officer's advice, it states that the tree is valued at $80,000. I just want to understand how that's valued, just for my own future reference, and also the $25,000 estimated cost, which is a works to maintain the area surrounding the tree. Is that a one-off cost, or is that a recurring figure?
In terms of the amenity value, it's a fairly complex formula, but well accepted by a number of councils. The main factors that are considered are the size of the tree, so the actual diameter of the tree, if you like, the health of the tree, and the remaining life. And this is a fairly substantial tree, 21 metres tall. So that is what builds up that amenity value, if you like. we could provide a further breakup outside the meeting if you like. In terms of the $25,000, that's an estimated cost for replacing the curb and channel, but also, if you like, moving the location of the curb and channel to allow for better growth of the roots and the tree itself. So it'd be $25,000 up. We expect it to last for a number of years, but given the size of the tree, there will be ongoing maintenance required to that curb and channel, I imagine. But we'll part of the design of it is to allow for a bit of that growth.
Mm-hmm. Continue. Yep.
So I'll just make the quick point that the maths stack up as well. I think it's well worth spending $3,000 to $4,000 to remove the tree, so that we don't spend tens of thousands of dollars over the coming 5 to 10 years. So yes, I agree. We all love trees, but this is what we're here for, to consider cases like this, and I'll definitely be supporting the removal. Thank you.
Any other comments, Council? Yes, Councillor Fergus.
Thank you, Mayor. And look, thanks all for your comments. First, I'd just like to say to the residents, you're doing the right thing. You're advocating to your representatives. You're going through the process. You're doing it respectfully. I completely, support your right to do that, and I like when residents are engaged. However, I'm going to disagree with what you're putting forward here. But I just wanted to preface it with that, because none of this is about your approach. I think it's been very respectful, and I thank you for that. Colleagues, I just want to put forward the point that we all stand around this table a lot of the time and we say, we all love trees, and yet half of us come in here month after month and vote to remove various trees. They're very extremely large, mature specimens. Our Director of Infrastructure just said before this particular tree is 21 metres tall. And then, we're hearing, we'll put up some other canopy trees and we'll replace it. Well, do you know how long it takes to grow to that size? Have you seen how big this tree is? That's not something we can replace overnight. In fact, the estimates here of that tree's worth is significant. That tree's value is the same as many of the projects we've just passed in tonight's budget by itself. And we're talking about just flicking that out. We'll probably do the same next month with something else. If we take this approach where individual councillors come here and support individual residents to remove trees outside of our agreed process, we have an agreed process for this. It's quite efficient. There are many trees removed under the process. There are many trees which can be removed without coming to council at all for various reasons. This is for significant trees only, and if we start to jettison our current process, then I really feel like we're going to see further erosion of our overall canopy across Monash, which has already been extremely impacted upon, as we've seen in our draft urban landscape and vegetation strategy over the last 2 decades. I think we're forgetting, when we listen to individual residents' very, real and serious concerns about their own properties, that's important. But I think we're forgetting holistically, looking at our municipality and what people want us to do in terms of trees and vegetation is protected. Our own surveys have showed us very clearly 71% of people consider trees to be very important for their neighbourhood. 93% consider it to be important or very important. That's overwhelming. And when we ask people for comments, we've got 80% of comments about change in terms of trees in people's local neighbourhoods. Just last year, 80% of comments were negative. People are telling us that the loss of mature trees and gardens due to increased subdivision, increased development, tree removal is critically important to them. They're telling us they don't want to see this anymore. So I think we really have to look holistically at what our municipality wants, what people are telling us. They don't like seeing less trees around.
Thank you, Councillor.
And we need to stop this approach.
Any other comments, Council, before we go to the vote? Councillor Lake.
Thanks, Mayor. I voted against the report at the last meeting that dealt with a similar nature strip tree. I think it was in Mulgrave.
Yeah.
And I took some time to outline my reasons why, because in the past I've certainly been a proponent for putting people before trees, whilst still being somebody who appreciates trees and I support a tree canopy. I viewed the matter last month as not quite sufficient justification to warrant council removing that tree. I formed a different view on this one, and originally I actually had come down in favour of retention of this one as well, but I've changed that view in the last couple of days after giving it some further consideration. And my view is simply this. I think these matters come down to common sense, and applying common sense here, the idea of us choosing to incur at least $25,000 of expenditure of public money to try to find ways that we can live with this tree in our urban environment, and in doing so burdening the residents who live directly adjacent to this tree, clearly against their wishes. And this isn't just a request that they've made casually in the last few months. As has already been detailed, there's history going back almost 10 years as far as engagement with this council by the residents, Mr and Mrs Duke, expressing concern about this tree. And I just don't think that we're doing our jobs properly if, in the face of all of that, we say that $25,000 plus, because we don't know what costs well into the future will be, is a reasonable amount of money for all of the ratepayers of Monash to subsidise the retention of this one particular tree. We know from the recent study we did a year ago or so into our trees across public spaces in Monash, I think we've got more than 100,000 trees. You don't have to do the maths to work out the kind of financial impact for this community if we start spending tens of thousands of dollars to retain trees that unfortunately have outgrown the urban environment in which they're planted. There are ways that we can replace this tree with other more suitable plantings. We perhaps go from one tree to potentially 2 or 3 that will grow to be more appropriate in size. And I think that is the sort of common sense that we ought to apply here. Financial common sense, but also common sense that these are the people who live with this tree, not us, none of us. These residents do, and they've got a right to enjoy their home without fear of property damage or person damage because of this tree.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments, Council, before we go to the vote? I might just say a few words also. There's no doubt in my mind then when my colleagues around this table say that they love trees and they're supporters of trees, that they mean that. So there's no doubt in my mind. We value trees and what they do for our community and for the environment. But the trigger for me, and it's already been echoed by my colleagues, is that I value the well-being of my community. And when our community tells us that their well-being and their health is deteriorating, they're living in fear, I think we need to stand up and act. And I think I commend Councillor Davies for bringing this forward. We note that this tree, if it is successfully removed tonight with the support of the collective, it will be replaced by other trees. We're not saying remove it and walk away, and nor is Mr and Mrs Duke either. So I commend the report, and I look forward to the outcome in seconds' time. So all those in favour? All those against? Okay. All those in favour? Councillor? Yep, okay, so all those in favour. Well, I think, was it carried or lost? So can we have the division, please? I'm not sure if the numbers are there to carry the report. Councillor Davies, Councillor Lake, Councillor Choi, that's 3, Councillor Zarafas 4, myself 5, and Councillor McCluskey 6. And all those against? Councillor Salumi, Councillor Little, Councillor Fergus, Councillor Patterson, Councillor James. It's carried. Thank you. Okay, we're moving along, Council, to item 6.5, Youth Mental Health. I'll move that. Councillor Patterson will second it. I open it to the floor for any discussion before I say some words on it. No? Yes, Councillor Fergus?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, not to make too fine a point of it, but in my day job, I run a charity which, among other things, is one of the leading experts on therapeutic horticulture. And part of what we use horticulture for, nature and gardening therapy, trees and plants, is to benefit the mental health of young people. Now, some of those young people come from Monash, but they come from all over the place. But I'd just like to make the point, this headspace advocacy is really important. It's something we've been working on for a long time during this council, but I think we need to take seriously how we design our community, how we invest in our community, and how we protect assets like trees in our community, because they are all part of holistically looking at the mental health of our young people. So I respect the decision that's just gone previously. However, I'd urge us, in line with this particular advocacy push, we've all been in support of this all the way through, that we do need to look holistically at these issues, and that there's significant bodies of evidence showing that these sorts of things, even individual trees, can make a huge impact on people's mental health.
Any other comments, Council? Councillor Davies.
Thank you, Mayor. I think certainly I support mental health facilities and making sure that we have as much as possible. I do note last month we had a bit of a contentious discussion over how we were over the approach, and I would say I spoke to Julia Banks. She wasn't that impressed by the council response. Anyway, I'll just mention that. I do think it's good to write to Minister Greg Hunt. I think he's running a very effective health ministry. They've certainly done some great work over the last couple of years. I do know Greg personally. He is a champion operator. So I think that's good. You can write to Julia Banks, but I think from the last comments, I'm not sure how that will be received. I also did note that there is another, I suppose, avenue of attack on this issue, and I noticed that state opposition recently announced that they'll deliver funding of $1.1 million for the Barrett College Health and Wellbeing Center, with the intention the center will provide mental health services for local youth and promote healthy communities. So I think there is a state government optionality here as well that we should be pursuing, and as it's an election year, that might be another approach to take. And it looks like in this case where they have had the funding, they've partnered with a local operator. So I would maybe suggest that we actually get out into the community, look for a local operator. We can get some extra space from them, or some sort of facilities, so that we can then partner with the state government and that operator and ourselves, and actually build and develop a facility. So I think that might be another approach that we could take, rather than just writing letters, which hasn't seemed to work for the last couple of years. I think we should get out and try and find some sort of business partnership to progress this issue.
Any other comments, Council? No? Okay, well, I'm going to just conclude by just saying a few words, given that it is my nom and a very important nom at that. Look, I welcome everyone's contribution. There is no doubt that mental health is killing Australians. Mental health has no borders, doesn't discriminate, can impact on any one of us at any age, at any time of our life. I had the fortune and perhaps misfortune yesterday of sitting in a youth forum where our Director of Community Services, Julie Solomon, joined me with some young students who live in Monash, and I walked away shattered. I was containing the tears, fighting back the emotions, to listen to the young men and women who average age was probably 14, so between the ages of 12 and 6 and 18, telling us that they're struggling and that they can't and don't have the means or capacity to go outside our city to reach out to get the help that they need. It was quite amazing and emotional, Julie. I know you know that too. So, and you're right, Councillor Davies. What we are doing is we're not going to sit on our laurels and wait, whilst we will advocate to both sides of politics, parties and anyone else who wants to work with us at any level of government. We have decided as a city to do something about it, even though it's only a band-aid solution or a small attempt, nonetheless a very important attempt. So we're going to offer a headspace service per se, for a couple of days a week for a few hours. And when we spoke about that yesterday with our young people, they were ecstatic and cannot wait for this to be up and running. As I said a month ago, it impacts just over 5.2% of our community, and it just happens to be that those 9,600 men and women are all of young age, and they struggle to sleep, They struggle to get up in the mornings. They're suffering with anxiety, depression, and some have even expressed that they've been, thinking of suicide. So it's tragic. And mental health impacts 25%, I found out yesterday, of our nation is inflicted by this horrific disease. And the onus on all of us to do all we can. So I commend this. I congratulate you, Julie, and your team, because you've driven this. Yes, Councillor Patterson started the crusade last year as our mayor. I've taken the baton on, but it's your team that is working together with all the other services to come together to do something at the very least to reach out and keep that door and that pathway open to those young men and women who need it urgently. They needed it yesterday, and hopefully after tonight we'll get it ASAP. So thank you. Okay, Council, all those in favour of the report? All those against? Okay, all those in favour? Councillor Salumi, Councillor Little, Councillor Fergus, Councillor Patterson, Councillor McCluskey, myself, Councillor James, Councillor Choi, Councillor Lake and Councillor Davies, and against Councillor Zagrafis. Thank you, Council. I will excuse myself and hang over to the Deputy, and I'll be back.
Thank you, Councillors. Item 6.6, EBIC Tom Morrissey Building Refresh. It's a report from Councillors Little, Patterson and Salumi. So mover is Councillor Little, seconded by Councillor Patterson. Any discussion on the item, Councillors? Yes, Councillor Little.
The EIBC operates out of two buildings, one of which is now looking a little bit old and faded. The idea behind this scheme is to make the old building, the Tom Morrissey building, and the new building, the Jesse Tate building, work a little bit better, and it will provide some new facilities, it will provide a refresh to the EIBC. The issue for the EIBC, though, is being a non-profit organisation. They need, we think, around, or it could be up to $270,000 to complete this refresh, this refurbishment. Where do they get the money from? Now, being a non-for-profit, going to the bank is difficult. At the last board meeting, we decided that we would approach Council. Council can make a loan out of the development fund. EIBC will pay that loan back over the period. We may not, EIBC may not need the full $270,000, but we would like to make that loan available. I think that if you read through what's involved in the refresh, I think you'll see that the outcome is terrific. It will create a space in the Jesse Tate Hall which will be a usable lecture / demonstration / presentation space for up to about 130 people. That will make that building so much more usable. It will make an open space, a co-working space available in the older building, which will make that far more usable. So I do commend this item to Council and hope we get the support it deserves.
Thank you, Councillor Little. Any other councillors? Yes, Councillor Davies.
So I do support the concept here. I was a previous director of the EIBC, and I thought it was a good idea. I don't know the financial metrics and the returns for this, but I presume the board has gone through that and they've signed off that this is a good project with good returns and it's worthwhile for the investment. I understand the reluctance of for a not-for-profit to borrow money, so I'm reasonably supportive. But the main issue I have, I guess, is providing money at 0%. I think these sort of projects, or any sort of project, should have some reflection of a cost of capital. You don't hand over free money. We do have an obligation to ratepayers to make sure that the ratepayers' money does generate a return. So, look, I'd just like to propose an amendment. The amendment would be for point 3, that the loan be provided at an interest rate consistent with the RBA cash rate. And so that's my amendment. So basically take out the 0% and put in a note that it's consistent with the RBA cash rate. I'll note the RBA cash rate I think is 1.5% at the moment. So all we're doing is moving from a 0% free money to a nominal interest rate, which does reflect some level of commerciality to this deal and holds our responsibilities to ratepayers intact.
Have you a seconder for amendment, Councillor Davies?
Sorry?
Yes. Sorry, there's a seconder, Councillor James. Is that agreeable to?
No.
to neither of the mover or seconder, so we debate on the amendment? Yeah, debate on the amendment. Anyone speak on the amendment? Well, you don't have to.
I've sort of spoke to the amendment already, but basically this is just a reflection to reflect some level of commerciality to the project. We don't know what the returns are. Maybe they're huge returns for the EIBC, maybe they're low. All we're doing is moving from a free money paradigm to a very low interest rate, which is 1.5% at the moment, and I think that's completely in the bounds of the commerciality and what ratepayers would expect us to do.
Anyone else want to speak on the amendments? Councillor James.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I brought this up last week in a briefing session, and I agree with the amendment. I just think that if it was a community organisation, a not-for-profit organisation, I'd be happy to loan money at 0% interest. I just think that this is a commercial operation, so I need to be mindful that even though it's tied into it, there needs to be some sort of interest rate attached to it. I don't think that we should be in the business of trying to make money like the banks do at 5 or 6%. So I think the RBA cash rate of 1.5 or 2% or whatever it is nominal, but it does signal that council's not just going to lend money willy-nilly, and it is a commercial transaction. So I'm happy to support the RBA cash rate.
Yes, Councillor Fergus.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Look, I take on board the points raised by Councillor Davies and Councillor James. However, I just point out that the $270,000 is going to be spent on our buildings. We're going to get a return. That's our return, in my view. I'd agree with you if they were going to take the money and go and spend it on a new facility that had nothing to do with us. But the reason I don't agree with you and I don't support the amendment is because we're already getting the value. We're getting the value of a renewed and vital and reinvigorated EIBC, and we're also getting capital investment in our buildings. So I really think this is a great deal for us here, and I commend the three councillors for bringing it forward, but that's all I wanted to say on the amendment.
Councillor, did you want to speak? Councillor Slimy.
I just wanted to make a comment of why Councillor Davies would have suggested a small interest rate. That would be because then it would incentivise the EIBC to repay earlier. So as a board member, I'm a bit conflicted because obviously I'm a councillor and also I'm a board member of the EIBC, so it's difficult when you've got two hats on. But I can say that we have been advised that the carpet is due for renewal in 2019, and so very likely the loan will probably only be $140,000 rather than $270,000 in total. We're not sure. We're going over here like that, but I think we ought to make a point of saying that it's possibly, quite a bit less than what we have first been advised. Before we got the officer report. And I do understand that if we do have a small interest rate component, that means it's a bit fairer to our ratepayers, given the fact that otherwise we are foregoing any sort of interest that we might get in a bank if it was invested by the council. So having said that, I did actually ask earlier today if we had a conflict of interest being on the board and being councillors, and I have to say it's not an easy place to be when you want to consider both the ratepayers and the EIBC. But I know that Danielle Story, our CEO at the EIBC, is a dynamic lady. She will make the most of it, and as Councillor Fergus said, we have got a real reason to support any refurbishments because it is our building, and in that situation, people do see it as a Monash property. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Little.
This is going to be very short because Councillor Fergus said exactly what I was about to say, which is this money is going into council property, so it will be adding to the capital value. To add an interest rate on top of the money that council would be providing if this goes through is sort of like double dipping. It's sort of saying, okay, I can get interest payments from the EIBC, but at the same time I'm seeing the capital value of those buildings increase quite significantly. That's why we set it at 0%, and that's why I will be not supporting the amendment.
Okay, yep. Thank you. Josh, you want to... Oh, sorry. Councillor Patterson? Yep.
I just wanted to speak to the idea that the EIBC is not a not-for-profit. It is not. It's a not-for-profit organisation. This is not a for-profit organisation. So they're not going to make this money and spread it around to shareholders or anything like that. They're taking this money, they're putting it back into Monash Council facilities that Monash businesses, new Monash businesses, innovative startups can access at a reasonable rate to keep their business in the city of Monash, to do their business here, and then later go and purchase property or rent facilities here in the city of Monash and become ratepayers themselves through that process, employ people in the city of Monash. This is a centre of innovation. We all know how fast-moving innovation and entrepreneurship is. Because it's so fast-moving, despite the fact that it's not one of the buildings in particular is not very old, we need to keep updating these buildings to make sure that they meet the needs of the current startups, the current entrepreneurs, that they actually meet those needs. Otherwise, we won't get people in there. We won't have full subscription. And then we'll just have empty infrastructure sitting there doing nothing. This is not a for-profit business. It's a not-for-profit who's sowing the seeds of new business and innovation into our Monash community, and not only are we getting an upgraded building out of that, but we are also getting innovation, we're getting startups, we're getting entrepreneurs, and we're getting a thriving business community in the city of Monash via the EIBC.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Any more on the amendment? No? We'll put the amendment... Sorry, yes, Councillor Choi.
I think the EIBC have done their fantastic work, and for other cities, the government may subsidising money to help to create and development of this kind of business. We are just putting a loan. So, for my opinion, I don't think we should charge interest. As what Councillor Fergus said, it's a capital council. It will be our building, and that will be the return. And I'm happy to see the development of the Eastern Innovation Business Centre. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll put it to the vote now. All those in favour of the amendment? Oh, sorry.
I'm going to let the deputy finish because he started the process.
That's okay with you, Councillor Zagrafis?
That's okay, Councillor. When I need your advice.
So, all those in favour of the amendment? All those against? Okay, the amendment is lost, so we move back to the substantive motion before us. I think we've had... Or is there anyone that hasn't spoken previously wish to speak on the report as this? Yes, Councillor Fergus.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Look, I just wanted to add on the substantive motion now that that's dealt with. I really want to commend the three councillors and the board of the EIBC. I think this is something that we really should be seeing a lot more of, innovative solutions to projects that we think have value. Now, this is something that we didn't fund throughout the budget that we've just passed this evening, but this is something which nevertheless is going to happen, hopefully, because I think we've been presented with an innovative model here which makes sense given this particular project. I think it makes sense for the EIBC, it makes sense for council, it makes sense for the community. We're going to get a further investment in local economic development. We're going to get further investment in a community facility. It's going to be good for the organisation. It's going to be good for local people trying to start up innovative businesses. And I think that hopefully if we pass this evening, this is something that we could perhaps see more of with future projects of this nature. I think this is a way for us to realise some of the things that we want to do at minimal or no cost to council, getting some return, and with great benefits to some of the community partners we work with. So I'd really encourage us to think about how this model and other similar models can be used into the future to make sure that we are keeping up to scratch with our community infrastructure and our community partnership building.
Thank you, Councillor Fergus. Anyone else on the motion before us? No. Okay, so on item 6.6, all those in favour? All those against? And that is carried.
Thank you, Deputy. Item 6.7, response to the Monash Forum. Councillor Fergus will move his nom. Do we have a seconder? Councillor James, any discussion? Yes, Councillor Fergus.
Just very briefly, Mayor, it's all contained in the report. I just felt that this was an issue that we needed to address, not talking about any political parties or politicians in particular, but I think this is a branding issue for us. The Monash name is being used in a way which is not in line with our council plan and our strategic objectives, and that's why I consider this important to bring to us this evening.
Any other comments, Council, before we go to the vote? Yes, Councillor Davies.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't support this motion, I think for a couple of reasons. One is I don't really think this is our purview or relevant to local government at all to be commenting on what federal MPs are doing and what they name certain groups. I think it's largely a waste of time, but as long as we're wasting the time, I thought I'd talk about the issue here. Look, I do think coal is a great resource. It's helped billions of people come out of poverty. It's helped develop the Industrial Revolution. It's been a fantastic resource over hundreds of years, and it will continue for many more hundreds of years. And in fact, there are now 1,600 new coal plants being planned or under construction around the world. 1,600 new coal plants. The world is basically saying, we want it and we want more of it. We're not going to stop it here at Monash Council. It's a fait accompli. But a lot of these coal plants are the new HELE or high efficiency, low emissions type coal plants. And if we in Australia replaced all of our current coal plants tomorrow with the new HELE plants, we would very likely achieve our emissions reduction targets overnight if we replace them overnight. So I do think coal is a very efficient way of producing electricity. It can provide a competitive resource both at an emission level and at a power production level. I think, look, there's better resources. Water is certainly a better resource. Unfortunately, all the water or most of the water in Australia is up north. So it's hard for that to be an option for down south. Nuclear is an option. There's been some discussion, but that's a good base load. But really, coal is the base load that you really need, and it's accepted around the world. Like I said, there's 1,600 power plants that are being built. There's new technologies that are available that massively cut emissions. So I don't really have a problem with coal being in the mix, and so one, I don't have a problem with coal being used as part of our resource generation, and two, I don't think this is an issue that council should be considering or commenting on. We just don't have the experience or the knowledge within the power industry to be picking and choosing which resources the Australian people use.
Any other comments, Councillor Little? And I'll come back to you, Councillor James.
This motion really has very little to do with coal power generation. It's to do with the sheer rudeness, the audacity of this group of people to choose a name without going through the sheer courtesy of dealing with the family. I was listening to the John Fane program a couple of days ago when family members got on the radio, and they said they were actually appalled that this group of people, who are essentially Luddites in promoting power generation, should be using the family name, because it clearly is a reference to the family name. This is not about coal power generation per se. It's about the misuse of one of the most respected names in entire Australian history. Now, getting back to a couple of comments that Councillor Davies has made, there is no such thing as efficient coal power generation. It doesn't exist. The so-called high-efficiency coal generations are not really high-efficiency. Coal is an inordinately inefficient way. And brown coal, which is the sort of coal that we've got in Victoria, is manifestly it's even less efficient than normal coals. There is only one reasonably efficient coal, and that's the coking coal that comes out of New South Wales. But that is very different to most of the coal supplies around the world. Now, Sir John Monash was actually an innovator. As a civil engineer, which again I think is something to do with the reference to the this Monash group, as a civil engineer he pioneered the use of reinforced concrete. He was a tremendous thinker, way ahead of his time. Now I'm sure if Sir John Monash was alive today and he would show those same instincts for innovation, he would be looking at alternate power supplies. He would not be looking at a technology that was invented a century ago. So again, I think this is a very worthwhile. I'm glad Councillor Fergus brought it to our attention. I think we should endorse this completely. We should protest, particularly in the point 2, joins with the saluting Monash Council and the descendants of General Sir John Monash in objecting to the misuse of the name Monash.
Councillor James.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. And I think Councillor Davies has missed the point, and I think that Councillor Little did get the point and then missed it with the second half of what he was saying. This is nothing to do with coal. It's nothing to do with coal generation, unless, of course, I almost called a point of order on Councillor Davies for diverting, but unless you say point 3 and you disagree with the council plan, you disagree with council reducing emissions, you could probably argue an argument for coal. This is about protecting our brand. This is the brand of Monash and what we signify. And Councillor Lake's about to move an item of urgent business a little bit later on the AEC naming a electorate down in Macmillan, renaming it to Monash for exactly the same reason. We are trying to protect our brand. This has nothing to do with coal whatsoever, at least unless I've misunderstood the intention of your motion. This is about protecting our brand and ensuring that other people aren't using it for things that don't align with our strategic goals and directions. And I am absolutely flabbergasted that we've wasted almost 10 minutes arguing on the generation of brown coal.
Okay, anyone else? Yes, Councillor Graffuss.
Yeah, look, I disagree with what's just been said. I don't believe that any organisation that's named after somebody else has any ownership over that name. As great as a name may be, as strongly held views by the family of that person, in this case Sir John Monash, who we all know, yes, a great person. So that's just on principle. Councillors can have their own personal view and in their own personal time say whatever they like, but particularly when it's concerning what I believe is still a very controversial issue around the ways in which our energy comes from in the future. I just think this is a complete waste of time, and it's not a reflection on Josh Fergus. It's a reflection on the principle of someone's name. We don't own it. It's a name that's used by many organisations, as we all know, and some infrastructure items are named after Sir John Monash. So I just think it's a very moot point. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments before we go to the vote? Yes, Councillor Lake.
Thanks, Mayor. It's like we've stepped back into the 1950s in the last 15 minutes or so. And I've got to say, I agree with the two Joshes, Josh Fergus and Josh Frydenberg. Josh Frydenberg, of course, being the member for Kooyong, but also relevantly the Energy Minister and a senior member of the Turnbull government. And in fact, I probably misspoke before when I said it feels like we've stepped back into the 1950s, because he described this as horse and buggy era policy. So perhaps I should have said we've stepped back into the 1850s in listening to somebody laud the wonderful advances of coal and the possibilities that it produces. There's no doubt, Mayor, as I think Josh Frydenberg quite eloquently said a few weeks ago when he made public comment on this, there is no doubt that if Sir John Monash was alive today, or he lived in this generation, there is no doubt he would be associated with renewable energy, new technologies, new frontiers, not harking back to a bygone era when coal was a resource that did propel Australia and other advanced countries to all sorts of prosperity. But in doing that, it has also had a very dramatic impact on our climate and on our environment. Yep. And having lived through all of that, if he was alive today, Sir John Monash would be a voice for progressive change and for innovation. And it is fundamentally wrong to associate the outstanding reputation that continues to surround the Monash name with being associated with what is essentially a group of far-right, regressive Conservatives in the federal parliament who are out of step with even the political party that they all hail from. And it is important, as others have said, what the Monash name is associated with. Monash is associated with a university, one of Australia's great universities. I think it's our biggest university, Monash University. He's associated with one of our most outstanding hospitals in the country. He's associated with the Monash Scholarship group that provides an opportunity to study overseas to some of the most outstanding students each year in Australia. These are all, and obviously us as a council, these are all things that the Monash family, as far as I'm aware, are very proud for his memory to be associated with. And others have no right, I think, to try to hijack that good name and the things that Monash is associated as one of the greatest Australians who has ever lived, and use it for this kind of a cause.
Councillor Salumi, have you spoken to Councillor Little? You have, so then put your hand down. Councillor Salumi.
I'll just make a point of saying that tonight Peter Grester was putting forward a documentary at 8:30 on ABC on Sir John Monash, and it's probably worth looking at on iView. Talking about whether people own names or not, I do remember the arguments a few years back about Bradman, and I've just pulled it up. The Bradman family sued over the use of the Bradman name in August 2011. So there's quite a few posts here, and there was a settlement out of court. So I did recall that, and Bradman is a name a bit like Monash. It's instantly recognisable, and there's not a lot of people that would be associated with those names. So, and I was actually personally appalled as well that the Liberals and the Nationals got together, just a group of them I might add, it's not all of them. So it was not so much the entire party, but just a few that decided to use that name, and I couldn't see how they could possibly associate that with Sir John Monash. So I agree with conferring that we don't agree with it, and I was also someone that put forward the Saluting John Monash Council nom in about the first council meeting that I was involved in. So I will support this, although I don't particularly like things being political, and I don't like them entering into the realm of state or federal politics. But in this case, I will take an exception. Thank you.
Okay, and with that, I think we'll go to the vote. All those in favour of the nom, as is written, and those against? Division. Okay, all those in favour, Councillor Salumi, Councillor Little, Councillor Fergus, Councillor Patterson, Councillor McCluskey, myself, Councillor James and Councillor Lake, and against Councillor Zagrafos and cheeky Councillor Davies. Thank you. Okay. All right, let's get on with it. We go to item 6.8, container deposit scheme. Councillor Fergus, I think, wants to move it, and Councillor Little will second it. How does that sound? Grabs you? Good on you. Anyone who wants to speak on it? I'll come back.
Thank you, Mayor. This is fairly straightforward. Victoria is now the only state without container deposit legislation. I think it is very timely for us to be moving this and putting it to the State Conference of the MAV for consideration for the local government sector in the Victoria to reaffirm their support for CDS legislation as a whole. Given what's happening with recycling at the moment, I think it's pretty obvious. We'd like to see what's being collected to be clean and appropriately sorted, and we'd like to enlist the community's help to do that. That is exactly what a container deposit scheme does. I don't expect this will be controversial, and I thank Councillor James and Councillor Little for putting their names to the report also.
Now, Councillor Davies, make sure you don't take us to another tangent. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm happy to support this. I would just say that we should be cautious with these sort of schemes. The law of unintended consequences can come into effect very easily with these type of schemes. And I was just listening to Alan Jones on the radio earlier this week, and he was commenting about the New South Wales container deposit scheme. And in his view, what was happening was the producers of the containers or the beverages were increasing their prices for the container deposits. And what was happening then? Consumers were paying more for to use these goods, but basically they would then throw them away. There wasn't an effective return methodology. And so what was happening was the producers were basically just increasing their profits by tens of millions of dollars a year. That was his view. So I would just say these things need to be constructed very carefully to not just increase consumer costs for no actual recycling benefit. You do need to consider how these are constructed to make sure the law of unintended consequences does not apply to them. So I would just say proceed with caution to make sure that a scheme is properly constructed. But I'm happy to support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. We've had Cole and Alan Jones from Robert today. Good on you, Robbie. Councillor James.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you to Councillor Ferguson Little for also putting this forward, and thank you to Oz and his team for preparing the report and the statistics for it. I sincerely hope that any scheme would be developed with renewables rather than coal energy. I didn't want to go there, but I just couldn't resist. Just to touch on what Councillor Davies just said, in South Australia, to the best of my knowledge, what they did when they introduced that scheme was they actually increased or put a levy, if you like, on every plastic container and can in the state. So they put a 5% levy on it that the people that created the plastic containers and the cans had to charge on top, so they charged that on. And then that company would hold that, similar to GST, and then would refund that 5%, that 5 cents back when the container was put back. So I don't think there's a risk of raising the cost per se to just put a levy on it and then give that levy back in the event that is refunded. This scheme, I think I mentioned, there was one in Victoria in the 80s, because I think I remember
70s too.
70s as well. I wasn't.
And even when Nick was around in the 50s.
Sorry, I was born in the 70s, Paul. I can't remember. Back in those days, because I remember collecting cans at school, and we had bags and bags of them sitting out the back, and Dad decided one day to take them all down to the school and donate them, and I was shattered, because that was, we were going to make a fortune, me and my brothers, on that. Look, this is a sensible motion. It's a sensible scheme to have in place, and it's absolutely dumbfounding that we don't have it at the moment. The New South Wales, I believe, put one in the last couple of months where they actually have vending machines that you can go and you can deposit all your cans and bottles into the vending machine. It just spits out your money refund. So it's a no-brainer. It's an easy way that we can start recycling properly rather than them ending up in the beaches and gutters and drains and litter. And if it makes anything easy on our waste team as well, in the terms of curbside collection, my recycling bins fill after a week and are only collected every second week. So, no-brainer. Let's hope that the state government get on board and commit to this sooner rather than later.
Okay. Anyone else wish to make any comments? No, you don't. Councillor Saludi.
I suppose I'm a bit confused how, when we saw the war on waste, and we've seen a lot of the programs on television, and they've had warehouses full of glass where no one's recycling them, and there's, bags and bags up to the ceiling of these bags of different glass. I mean, I think that the idea is admirable, but I don't know how it would ever work, because there's so many different containers now. They're made in all different countries. They're all different sizes, all different shapes, all different distributors, and the likelihood of things getting reused or melted down is really hard to come around now that we're looking at China not taking things, and Visi and everyone else wanting to up the prices of recycled goods. I just don't know how this is going to work. Could I get a comment from our Director of Infrastructure, please? Do you think it would work? Could work?
Certainly the experience with other states is that the scheme does work. Obviously Victoria hasn't designed its scheme as yet in terms of some of the detailed discussion around the table, but we expect that there will be a significant benefit in terms of recycling. We're saying probably save us about $17,000, but also include community participation in the pickup of what can be litter in the end. So we're expecting that there'll be less litter as a result of this scheme coming into place.
Can I ask, where would the items be deposited back to get the money? Would they be going back to the shop that they purchased from, or are they going into a depot, or are they going into Schweppes? Or I just don't get where you would be taking them to get the money back. Is there one of those people that have put up the nom able to answer that?
Okay, let's just keep it.
Sorry,
are you happy to give that, because then we'll get back on track? Because
look, just an example, I think the Scouts in South Australia, we mentioned in the report, have in the last year in South Australia collected $2.8 million. The Scouts have been active in terms of collecting and then disposing it. Some of the producers will collect those bottles, and there'll be other receivers as part of that levy that's put on the scheme.
Thank you. It's a great idea, but I don't know how it's going to work.
Okay.
That's my thoughts. Thank you.
Okay, I think we'll go to the vote. Everyone's shaking, nodding, smiling, winking. Okay, all those in favour? Unanimous. Well done. We got there eventually. Councillor Zagrafos. Sorry, 6.9 Clayton Police Station. Councillor Zagrafos will move. I'm assuming he's He's nodding. Yes, thank you. A seconder? Councillor Choi. Councillor Zagrafos.
Thank you. I just think it speaks clearly to what it's asking, so I'm not going to waste any more time.
Does anyone else wish to make any comments to the nom? Yes, Councillor Davies.
Mayor, I just wanted to ask a question. When we wrote the letter last time, did we get a response?
Yes, we did.
Okay. Yep. Could that response be shared at some point in the next few days?
Yep. Okay. Well, given that no one else wishes... Yes? Yes? Yep, go.
Sorry, I was one of the people that supported the original motion last year. I think Mick McGinn, the Monash Commander of Police, or whatever his inspector title, I couldn't remember his title, was here in the gallery at the time, and he was very supportive as well. When I saw the nom that Councillor Zagrafos put up, I was a bit dismayed that nothing had been done, according to the nom. So I actually spoke to, or sent an email off to the Minister of Police, and subsequently followed up with a phone call to her office. And I have a response from her, which I'm happy to share with the rest of the group. I've consulted with the Office of the Chief Commissioner of Victoria Police. They advised that at no time has Victoria Police suggested that the option of closing the Clayton Police Station would occur, and that the community continues to receive the same level of police service. Victoria Police have been consulting with key stakeholders to determine how to best address recommendations made following an OHS inspection by the Police Association. Security and upgrade works have been completed in 2017, including bollards installed at the front of the station, new carpet installed in the muster room, upgrade to the fence and access to the gate to the station, duress alarm installed, screen on the front counters installed, minor security lighting installed. The government is committed to providing our police with the resources they need to keep the community safe. I would note that as part of the latest deployment of the Monash Police Service Area, we'll now receive 12 new police over the next 12 months, which Councillor Davies has been advocating for. This boost comes as the recent data from Victoria Police shows that there are more full-time equivalent positions in the Monash PSA than there were in 2014. I trust that the information assisted with the deliberation on the matter. So hopefully that addresses Councillor Zagrafos' concerns.
Any other comments, Council, before we go to the vote? Yes, Councillor McCluskey.
Just quickly, thank you through you, Mayor. My aversion to not so much the content, but noms like this would be, I don't see much point in us expressing a disappointment in a refurbishment being delayed. Like, it's a normal operational thing of VicPol to refurbish and projects get delayed. I don't know why, but it's no different to me coming in saying, I know a fire station's been delayed in a refurbishment, let's express our disappointment. And we could come in here and say how many projects of council projects infrastructure have been delayed, and we express a disappointment. I would just caution. I'm not having directing this at all at Councillor Zagrafos own, but generally speaking, I just don't see the point in us expressing disappointment at the delayed refurbishment of the police station. It's operating. Its business is open. It's not closed. We've always heard from Inspector McGinn when he was here, and I imagine his successor, that it's never intended to close, not in the near future anyway. So I would just caution with, how many times are we going to come in here with little two-liners saying we express a disappointment, this and that? The other flip side of the coin is, are we going to come in here and say we express our absolute excitement when the police station refurbishment is finished, or we're going to do it when a pavilion's finished? So I just think it just gets a bit like there's people sitting there wondering when they're going to get their bit. It's a waste of time to me.
Okay. Any other comments before we... You've spoken, haven't you?
No, I'm happy to...
No.
Close.
There's no right reply, is there? There is? There is?
If no one else wants
I do apologise, Councillor Zagrafos.
If you want to speak...
No. The floor is yours if you wish to make a right reply.
No one else wants to...
2 minutes,
Yeah, thank you. So basically, from my recollection, there were only 2 councillors that voted against the resolution last year. So that means that nine supported it. So I just think, well, if you were interested in supporting it last year, then you're interested in whether it's been refurbished or not, or else you wouldn't have asked for it to be refurbished or to be advocated for it to be refurbished. Now, I'm happy to read whatever Councillor James has read out, and I haven't seen any confirmation by the government of any works that have been done regarding the OHS standards that were raised last year. But obviously it's a significant issue if they haven't been done, because it's a police station and people want their police stations to be up to standard. That's why it's in our interest to represent our community whenever there's any inkling of any police station being operational. Now, I'm happy to go there tomorrow and see how operational it is, but there are many police stations in Monash, like Mount Waverley, like Burwood, which incorporates the suburb of Burwood within Monash, that are closed. So if you've got an issue, you can't go to your local police station. So I just think that it's pertinent to note. That's all it does. I didn't want to speak to it because I'm happy for it to be voted on and move forward. Councillors have contradicted themselves by speaking on it and stating that it's a waste of time. Well, you can't have it both ways. I hope that people support just noting, that's all you're doing, and we move forward.
Okay, we'll go to the vote. All those in favour? Against? All those in favour? Councillor Salumi, Councillor Zagrafos, Councillor Choi, Councillor Davies. All those against? Councillor Little, Councillor Patterson, Councillor McCluskey, myself, Councillor James, Councillor Lake. Okay, 6.10, most dangerous and congested intersections in Monash. Councillor Zagrafos, whom move is none. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Davies. Discussion.
Yes, thank you. So, again, this is something that was considered by Council in December, and from memory it failed by 1 vote. I think it was 5 to 6. So I thought, well, it's only appropriate that councillors have a chance to consider the issue of traffic congestion, particularly around some announcements that have been made in recent weeks regarding the Mordialloc Freeway that the government apparently will build, and obviously saying that traffic congestion is a key issue in our community. That freeway will apparently start in Clayton, not within the city of Monash, but in the city of Kingston, but still be used by local residents. So this gives councillors an opportunity to change their mind and do the right thing. Not to say whether something is good or bad, or whether a project is good or bad, even though I think it's a good proposal. But if it's going to happen, well, at least to have the attention coming our way with some of our intersections to be grade separated and to be fixed. So driving here tonight, I was stuck in traffic for 45 minutes on Springvale Road, at the Fentry Gully Road intersection, at the Wellington Road intersection, at the Waverley Road intersection, stuck in traffic at red lights, not moving anywhere, maybe moving a few metres every 20 seconds or so. So that is just one example. There is no doubt that something has to be done, and there's a solution here. I'm not saying it's going to solve congestion overnight. It's not going to solve it probably over the next 12 months after it's implemented, but I think it will help. And we know that vehicles that are moving in one direction, they don't all go straight down. They will disperse, they will turn off, they will change direction like they do at on-ramps at freeways. So I think this will go a long way to help, and I hope that one councillor can change their mind from December to actually get some action in our local community. Thank you.
Any other comments, Council? Councillor James.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. And I don't really want to rehash what I said in the December meeting. I think it's a matter of public record, and those that are interested can go and view it online. But with my transport hat on, this is just a policy that just does not make sense. And it's not anything to do with politics. It's just simply a bad policy in my view. I can't see how you can build a bridge over a road, because all you're going to do is shift the traffic problem from one intersection to the next intersection, which is almost exactly what our officers have put in their response, which we didn't have under our local law last time this came up. The officer report also mentions in the 1960s North Road overpass at Warrigal Road, the North Road overpass and Warrigal Road overpass were constructed to remove rail crossings. Particularly in Oakley, where Warrigal Road was removed, is now a bridge. What that effectively did was divide the community in half. It killed all the shopping around there. They're now, most of them disused, abandoned buildings around that area, and it really killed off what was the centre of Oakley around the railway station there, and it's moved the centre of Oakley into where it is now, which is arguably trapped in a position where it can't move because it's got heritage gravestones and buildings to the north of it, the south of it and the east of it have, the south of it and the west of it have railway lines precluding it from going any further. So it is a policy that just simply does not make sense. It's only going to move traffic and move it somewhere else. What we need to do in this country, in this state, in this country, is change our attitude to how we deal with congestion. We're not going to deal with congestion building super freeways or widening Monash or putting bridges over things. We're going to ease congestion by putting more money into public transport and mass transit options to get people from A to B. Now, as I said in my article, 10 years ago we added a lane to the Monash. We're now adding another lane to the Monash. Presumably in another 10 years we'll add another lane to the Monash. How many lanes and how many freeways and how many roads do we have to keep doing before we realise that it just isn't working? We have to look at doing or dealing with congestion in different ways to what we're doing it. And I think that it's time for governments of all persuasions and of all levels to start planning for the future rather than making knee-jerk reactions to deal with what's in front of us now. When they built train lines out here or out to Oakley, Oakley was desert. Well, maybe not desert, maybe it was farmland. They built train lines out to Pakenham 100 years ago when there was no one out there, and then people built around it. Now we're getting to the stage where we're waiting for places to be absolutely swamped with population and going, oh hell, they need a train line. It's too late. You can't go and get the land there. Let's get back to building stuff and building transport for people and giving them options so they don't have to get in the car in the first place.
Any other comments, Councillor Fergus?
Thank you, Mayor. I apologise to Councillor Zagrafis for not... I didn't have time to reflect on our decision of December previously, but I since have, since speaking to him earlier today, and I remembered that the original motion as put was substantially amended, partly on my suggestion at the time, and so I don't support this motion as written, particularly point 2. Right to the State Roads Minister seeking a bipartisan commitment to remove these dangerous congestion bottlenecks. I don't support that because I don't support this being a #1 transport priority for the Victorian budget. I believe some of what Councillor James has said is accurate. I think our integrated transport plan and our advocacy priorities around transport at the moment would indicate that we'd much rather see, in our community, would much rather see investment in rail, the bus networks, even potentially light rail if that's on the cards as opposed to heavy rail, although I've got views about that also. But there's a great deal of other transport work which needs to be done before we spend billions of dollars on road infrastructure of this nature. So although I supported the amended motion in December, I won't be supporting this motion this evening. I am very happy to have it discussed this evening. I have no problem with Councillor Zagrafis bringing it forward again, but my view remains the same, that I can't support seeking this to be a bipartisan commitment. If the Liberal National Coalition wants to put this forward as a priority and they're elected as the government later this year, then that's one thing. But I certainly don't support pressuring the Labor Party or others to add this to a commitment. I'd much rather see the commitment to Rowville Rail, for example, which we've been calling out for in our ward for many, many years.
Can I move an amendment to remove point 2?
Yep.
Oh, of course. Okay. That's right.
I'll move an amendment to remove it then.
No, he can. He can. I've been advised that he can. It's his
Well, I
motion.
can seek leave, so I don't know if
No, that's okay. Yeah,
Well, I just move that. Remove
Right.
point 2.
That's okay. You can. So your amendment is?
Just to remove point 2.
Yep.
That's basically it.
Okay. You have a seconder for that?
I'm happy to second that, Mayor.
Okay. Okay. All right. We'll go to the vote. All those in favour of that? To remove point 2, Councillor Zagrafis has moved the motion to remove point 2 of his nom, which seeks to write to the State Roads Minister seeking a bipartisan commitment to remove these dangerous congestion bottlenecks. Hang on, you told me you could.
No. It's his own motion. He can't amend.
Sorry, Councillor.
Sorry.
Okay.
You can't.
Okay. Councillor James, you're moving to abolish that. Councillor Davis has seconded. Okay. Any discussion on that? Oh, it's fine. Councillor Day. Oh, he seconded the original report, so you can't even. Okay, Councillor Salumi will. Okay, so that's been removed. No? Okay, you discuss it. Okay, let's go. Okay. What, we've got another one. Yeah, does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Yep.
Look, I'm happy to move it for Councillor Zagrafis, but I don't agree with removing it. Well, I'm happy to vote to remove it, but it doesn't change my ultimate support for the substantive motion because I don't agree with points 1, 2 or 3.
Okay. Let's just put this amendment to the vote. The removal. Did you? Yep. Okay. Let's put it to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? It means nothing. It's just silly. Okay. It's lost. It's carried. It's carried. Was it? All those in favour? What? It's lost. It's lost. Okay. Back to the substantive.
Can I just get a division, please?
Okay. All those in favour of removing item 2 from the amendment? Councillor Salumi, Councillor Zagrafis, Councillor James, Councillor Choi, Councillor Davis. All those against? Councillor Little, Councillor Patterson. You're abstaining. Councillor Patterson, Councillor McCluskey, myself. So it's carried. No, there wasn't 5. Unfortunately, there was 5 in favour and 4. And there's 4. So it's lost then. Okay, it's lost. All right, thank you for that. All right. Yeah, and I'll second that. Okay. Let's put the nom to the vote. All those support for that to put this to the vote? Okay. All those against? All right. Immaterial. Okay. All those in favour of the nom as printed? All those against? That is carried. That is lost. Thank you. That is lost. Sorry. That's lost. All right. Division. All those in favour of the nom? Councillor Davis, Councillor Zagrafis, Councillor Choi, Councillor Salumi. All those against? Councillor Little, Councillor Ferguson, Councillor Patterson, Councillor McCluskey, myself, Councillor James and Councillor Lake.
Nick.
6.11. Councillor Fergus, happy to move that? Councillor Lake will second it.
Can I just clarify, Mayor? My name was meant to be added to this nom. Governance have said that was a mistake, so can that be noted that I'm meant to be one of the councillors on this nom?
Okay, no worries, it's noted. Okay, any discussion? Councillor Fergus.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I just wanted to say this is, I suppose, an opportunistic NOM in that the Melbourne Football Club have recently announced a plan to withdraw their club from any financial interests attached to the gaming industry. In line with this council's long history of advocacy on pokies matters in particular, and in line with the relationship between the Hawthorn Football Club and the City of Monash, which has been a long-standing relationship, I thought it was appropriate to bring this matter forward, and I thank Councillor Lake and Councillor James for their agreement on that. Venues associated with the Hawthorn Football Club here in Monash are responsible for more pokies losses than any other AFL club in the 2016-17 financial year. It's reached almost 24 million in that year of pokies losses, and 10.86 million of pokies losses occurred at the venue Vegas at Waverley Gardens in that financial year. Now that is a huge loss for the City of Monash. It's a lot of money that's been taken out of the local economy. And there have been football clubs that have been surviving without pokies at AFL level for years. It's clearly something which is possible, and I hope it's the way that the league is moving into the future. I think it's a good thing for us to put in a call to the Hawthorn Football Club to ask them to follow the example of Melbourne and get out of the gaming industry. I don't think they need it. They're a very successful football club, and I'd like to see them stand up for the community here, for the residents around Waverley Park and the broader Monash community with whom they've had a very long association, and say that that's not a way that they should be making their money into the future.
Any other comments? Councillor James.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm actually a member of the Melbourne Football Club, and this strategy of investing into poker machines was discussed at 2014, maybe 2015 AGM, where a number of members stood and questioned the executive at the time on the exposure of gaming machines to the football club and their disapproval that Melbourne was one of the many football clubs that hang their hat or had their revenue streams through there. And the question was raised at the time whether there would be a way to remove Melbourne from their exposure to gaming machines, and at the time the President at the time defended the stance that the club had, but it's good to see that they've gone away, they've had a think about it, they've had some discussions internally, and they've made a good direction to do this. They're not the only club, and Councillor Lake, I'm sure, will mention, I think the Western Bulldogs off the top of my head were another club that also withdraw, but again, Councillor Lake will no doubt clarify that. North Melbourne was another one. I think that it's important that football clubs set a message. They are people, our kids look after these people. I'm sick and tired of going to the football, or even watching football on television and seeing the odds splashed up at me every 15 minutes, or I think it's only at the end of each quarter now, but you go to the game and kids are looking up going, oh, Dad, they're favourites to win, they're favourite. Who cares who they're favourites to win? It's about the sport. So I think we need to take the gambling out of it. I know there's been a concerted push at many levels, including in the media, and it's good to see that AFL clubs such as the Melbourne Football Club and the North Melbourne Football Club have taken steps to take their profit levels away from that, and I urge others to come to the party as well.
Does anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Davies.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't particularly have a strong view on pokies or not. If people want to use them, I'm happy for them to use them. It's a legal entertainment vehicle for people to use. I guess I find the continued jihad by this council on pokies is amusing. We have some interesting discussion on the inner workings of the Melbourne Football Club, but it's completely irrelevant to the business of council, in my view. Others may be different. In my view, it's irrelevant. So I don't support this NOM. I think it's outside of our purview. Pokies is in fact a dying business. When you talk to pokies operators, they'll tell you their clientele is slowly getting older, and the younger generation, which Councillor James referred to, is not playing pokies. They're doing sports betting, online betting, and many other things. So that's the area that, if we think there's harm out there, that's really the area that is a concern, especially for the younger generation. Pokies is the old way of gambling. It's not a growing business. The number of pokies machines has been stable. for, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 years, probably in Victoria. I'm not sure how long. And we've seen a massive increase in population. So the actual usage of pokies is significantly deteriorating, and people have moved to other things. So, if you really want to spend your time on this, which is, in my view, not a council issue, we should be directing it in other areas, not into pokies. Thank you.
Councillor McCluskey.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. I haven't had the opportunity to speak to all the councillors related to this but I've briefly spoken to Councillor Fergus, so he knows my view, but I would have been happy to support point 1, and that's it. If point 2, 3, 4 and 5 weren't there, I would support it. I think it's appropriate to congratulate the Melbourne Football Club on their move. I'm not sure the rest is really within our purview. I think, I've said before, I think we're a bit too pokey focused here. Whilst I understand harm, I understand lots of gambling harm. I think we're a bit pokey focused, and I think if you look around, you'll see more people on phones who are multi-betting on all sports and all sorts of arrangement. You can bet on lots of different things. I'm notwithstanding the harm that's done by pokies, but I think we're a bit pokey-centric here. I've said it before, and I'd be happy to support point 1, but I'm not going to support the rest. Thank you.
Any other comments before we go to the vote? Councillor no? Councillor Lake.
Thanks, Mayor. I disagree with Councillor McCluskey's view. The Hawthorn Football Club holds itself out as the family club, yet it, in particular, but also the other AFL clubs that run poker machines, it could not be further from a family-friendly club when they operate the numbers of machines in vulnerable communities. It's no accident that their machines are located in the venues that they're located, and in Monash's case, in Waverley Gardens. Hawthorn Football Club does not have pokies in Hawthorn or in Toorak or in South Yarra. They have them in disadvantaged suburbs. They have it in locations such as Waverley Gardens, which is on the cusp of the border between Monash and Dandenong, and Dandenong is one of the most disadvantaged local government areas in the state, certainly in metropolitan Melbourne, and it is completely unconscionable that AFL clubs that are held out by our community to be exemplars of things that kids and people do. In fact, it's not just kids, it's all ages in our community we look up to, we respect them, we trust them, and there is one thing that tarnishes AFL clubs in Victoria, and the same is true of NRL clubs in New South Wales and the other places that they're located. It's their dependency on poker machines. And Richard Goyder, the new commissioner in charge of the AFL, who took over earlier this year, he is absolutely right to be doing everything that he can to wean AFL clubs off poker machines, and he deserves to be congratulated. But at the same time, we ought to condemn the Luddites like Jeff Kennett and others who are there protecting the old way. And most of the other AFL club presidents who operate poker machines are not as bold or as ruthless as Jeff Kennett in terms of his statements coming out in the last few weeks, attacking the AFL, attacking Richard Goyder, doing the right thing for the fans in questioning the dependency on poker machines, and basically at the same time just saying that his football club, Hawthorn, does not give a damn about corporate social responsibility. So we support this council, the majority of us. We support good people like Richard Goyder who are doing good things to try to lessen the impact of these machines and the impacts they have selectively on communities that can least afford these impacts. And unfortunately, our community in Waverley Gardens is one of those.
I'd like to move a procedural motion that this matter now be put to a vote.
Okay, a procedural motion has been put. Do we have a seconder? Okay, all those in favour? Okay, all those against? Okay, it's lost. Councillor Choi, you want to speak?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor, and my colleague give me opportunity to give a few comments. So I would like to echo Deputy Mayor Councillor Murkowski what he said. I'm happy to support point 1, but not the rest of it. The reason why is I don't see how it works. Like we are telling England Premier League fans, so we are telling Manchester United, look, Liverpool or Chelsea are doing something great. Why don't you follow? So it's just like, I don't know how it works in this way. And why don't we let Hawthorn Football Club to make their own decision by their football club members, but not intervene or tell them what to do? I think they are good people. They're great people. They know what they should do. So that's it. Thank you.
Councillor Salumi.
I want to know, are we also going to be right to the ALP and ask them, are they going to stop funding their political campaigns in Canberra by using poker machines? So if we're going to write to the Hawthorn Football Club, why don't we write to the ALP? Thank you.
Royal reply, Councillor Fergus, and then we'll get on with it.
Councillor Salumi, I will second that motion if you bring it to the next council meeting, quite happily. I'd just like to point out, though, the officer's advice on this norm very clearly spelled out why we would be talking to the Hawthorn Football Club as opposed to, any other organisation, and that's because of their high position of high influence within the City of Monash, their long-standing relationship with the City of Monash, the fact that they have relationships with local junior teams. They are an important local corporate citizen, and I think that's why we're talking about the Hawthorn Football Club in particular. I think it's entirely appropriate, and I don't think it's outside of our remit at all, and thank you to my colleagues who've supported the motion so far.
Okay, we'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Okay, moving on to committee reports.
Mayor, I would like to bring a procedural motion.
Yes.
Can we please elevate item 7.4 to come in front of the remaining section 7?
Do we have a seconder? Councillor McCluskey will second that. All those in favour? Okay, that is carried. 7.4, 2018-2019 Monash Community Grants Allocations. Do I have a mover? Councillor Patterson, Councillor James has seconded. I did flag earlier on, Council, that and I'll take that opportunity now to move an amendment to the recommendation, and that recommendation reads as follows, if Nick can hand it out to our colleagues, that we delete the entire section B as printed in our papers and replace it with the following words, that we fund South East volunteers at their revised budget request of $125,256.67, conditional on South East volunteers committing to ensuring the program is delivered in accord with council grant guidelines and only eligible costs are attributed to that grant. That's the amendment as printed and moved. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Little. I'll turn to the movers. Are you happy with that? Is the rest of the council happy with that amendment? Yes, nodding. Everyone's nodding. Okay, that now forms part of the substantive motion. So B's as printed has been removed and replaced with what I just read. Any discussion on the report? Look, I'll kick off that discussion. Yes? Happy to kick off, that's okay. As our colleagues will know, I was one of 4 councillors that sat on the grants committee committee this year, along with Councillor Patterson, Councillor Graffos and Councillor James. We will all say that it's not, whilst it's a rewarding process, it does a lot of great work. Now allocation of just over $2.5 million to our community. We're always grappling in ensuring that we get best outcome and best outcome for the public purse. So when we were framing our decisions around how we funded and who we were funding, we had to ensure that the guidelines were being met. Based on that sort of philosophy and synopsis, we made the decisions that we made. But I, and I know some of my colleagues, have reflected in more recent days, and the volunteers who are here today with Anne and her team have reached out to a lot of us and prosecuted their case, and we've listened, and upon reflection I felt that this amendment was required, and I know that moving forward SEVS, as as it's abbreviated and normally known as Southeast Volunteers, will continue the great work in our community and reaching out with their volunteers and connecting people and bringing people together. So that's what I have to say on that. Anyone else would like to make? Yes, Councillor Davies.
Mayor, I congratulate you on the about face from the committee's initial recommendation. So commend the change. I referred to the law of unintended consequences earlier. I think there's probably another law that would have applied here, was the law of really bad consequences, if this had been implemented as it is. So I think these are our most vulnerable people that the SEV looks after. There could have been impacts for the safety register, among many other things. So I'd just like to commend you for the change. I think this will go very well. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor McCluskey.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. I know there wasn't complete accord to support or not support the original motion in briefings and possibly tonight if it had stayed in the same form. But I think there's a win-win here. South East Volunteers get the funding that they say they really need to continue the good work. But the win for council is we can ensure that resident ratepayers' money that are going to South East Volunteers and other bodies we give money to, it's used in the right way. Our primary focus as the City of Monash is the residents and ratepayers of Monash. I know that South East Volunteers' work goes beyond Monash, but I guess as far as the money we pay as a council to bodies such as SEVs, we just need to ensure that the appropriate guidelines are in place so that the money is spent in an appropriate way and the most beneficial way as far as our resident ratepayers' interests go. So I congratulate all those that have put this together and the amendment, and I always support the amendment. I congratulate the Mayor on fashioning it and for the support for the SEVs turning up. And I think it's a win-win, and we can hold hands and move on with all the appropriate guidelines in place.
Any other comments, Councillor? Councillor James.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'll perhaps speak more broadly of the grants process rather than concentrating on South East Volunteers as most have done. I think that's part of the substantive now, so we've pretty much dealt with that. We have dealt with that. And I'll echo the thoughts that I put across in this chamber almost 12 months ago, and that is that this is by far the most rewarding thing that I do or have done in my time on council, and it remains that this year as well. I think that it is flabbergasting to see how many community groups out there work so tirelessly and so hard to look after or to provide community groups for others in the community. And I don't know if that sounded right, but I think everyone knew where I was going. And there are a lot of committees and groups that are dedicated with people that are full of people that dedicate their time week in, week out in their spare time to organise these groups and to get people together and bring our community together. And I think it is absolutely, I can't speak highly enough of it. Yeah, and Councillor Patterson, I know, spends a lot of time with a lot of these groups as well, and we speak of our admiration of a lot of the work that they do as well. My only disappointment in the grants committee process is that we can't fund it all, because I would love to fund it all. But I think that the work that these people do is absolutely phenomenal, and they should be congratulated for what they do. And those councillors, as I said last year, those councillors that haven't been on the grants committee, definitely put your hand up. And I know that Councillor Fergus has a conflict of interest in one of the groups. He can leave the room when that group's discussed, as I had to do with the Monash Gallery of Art last year. But I can't speak highly enough of the process, and I can't speak highly enough of our groups, nor the staff, Julie, your staff, that spend 8 or 9 months a year, probably more, probably 11 and a half months until they have 2 weeks annual leave, because we get them back to start again. But it's a really rewarding process, and I'm very, very proud of all those groups and of our council officers that support them through those.
Any other comments, Councillor Salumi?
Just quickly, I was at Highvale Retirement Village this afternoon for their Anzac Day, or pre-Anzac Day ceremony, and I was talking to some people at the table, and I said we're a bit worried about the South East Volunteers funding being cut, and they were all in unison saying, they're fantastic, they're wonderful, you can't cut their funding. We use them to get to our appointments, our doctors and that sort of thing. So I just wanted to put it out there that they were singing your praises this afternoon, and they'll be very pleased that your funding has not been cut.
Any other comments, Council, before we go to the vote? Yes, Councillor Lake.
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to take the opportunity with a number of people here from South East Volunteers that I think it's important that this is a wake-up call for your organisation, because there's no doubt you've lost the confidence of some people around this table, particularly on the officer side of our organisation, and there's been recommendations, made to councillors that, assuming that this vote is successful tonight, have not been accepted for now. But that's not necessarily something that should give rise to false confidence for how this might be treated in future years. So I think it is concerning some of the feedback we've had from our officers around unresponsiveness to communications and unwillingness to explain and justify the very significant contribution that this community makes to the operations of South East Volunteers, both in terms of the capital accommodation that's provided, but more particularly the recurrent grant funding. As you can see from what was originally recommended in the papers tonight, if Council was to follow that, there would have been a significant cut to your funding. But by the funding of the $20,000 program that was in the original recommendation, that clearly was getting Council to a point where potentially there could have been the entire amount that you were funded being discontinued from next year onwards. Now, that is not off the agenda. That is simply a temporary reprieve for 12 months. And the important thing is, I think for everyone in this room, is to work together collectively to provide the best volunteer package for the community in Monash. And we know that your areas of focus go beyond Monash now, and we support that. And I remember the presentation a few years ago around the change of name. And we wish you all the best with that. But it is very important that agreements that have been negotiated over the years that have a deliverable, a key performance indicator target as far as how we justify our ratepayers' money contributing to your organisations, that the things that are attached to that have been agreed are actually delivered, and that over the next few years we increase and expand the outcome of the good work that you do to the benefit of our community. So I wish you well. I certainly was not supportive of this report in its original form, but I want to make it very clear that I want South East Volunteers to work cooperatively with our CEO, with our Mayor and with anyone else from Council who engages with you over the coming months for a collective purpose of ensuring that our community in Monash is served to the best possible extent we can possibly achieve. And I think it's really incumbent on all of us to achieve that.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments, Council, before we go to the vote? No other comments? All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. And free to go home. Thank you. And sorry to hold you up. Well done. 7.1, Audit and Risk Committee minutes. Do we have a mover? Councillor Fergus, a seconder. Councillor Patterson, any discussion? No discussion. We'll go to the vote. All those in favour? Is it at 10 o'clock? Yeah. Okay. 7.2, Monash Gallery of Art, Committee of Management, departing members and approval of new members. A mover? Councillor McCluskey, a seconder. Councillor Davies, any discussion?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. I think it is in the report, but just to add to the report about thanking the great service and input from two outgoing members of Monash Gallery of Art Management Committee, and that's Dr. David Rosenthal and Mr. Phil Virgo. In my short time there, and I think Councillor James was last year with me on that committee, as was Councillor Davies this year. It's quite a vibrant, diverse community that have a particular bent, and that is photographic art, but they all work collaboratively to achieve the best they can for our great facility, Monash Gallery of Art. So I thank those people. I congratulate Ms Val Brown and Ms Kirsty Grant on their appointments, and I look forward to looking forward to working with those people in the near future.
Thank you, Councillor. And before we invite for anyone else to talk, Councillor James.
Mayor, I'd like to move a procedural motion that we extend the meeting for an extra half an hour.
I'll second that. All those in favour? Okay. Moving along. Anyone else wish to make any comments on 7.2? No? Okay. We'll go to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried. Item 7.3, Monash Neighbourhood Matching Grants. Do we have a mover for this? Councillor Patterson, Councillor Fergus will second it. Any discussion? Council? No discussion. We'll go to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried. Thank you. 7.5, appointment of new members to Environmental Advisory Committee. Councillor Fergus, happy to move it. Councillor Little's nodding that he's seconding. Any discussion? Councillor Fergus.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to thank officers for their work on this process. It was extremely efficient and we got an incredible array of applicants. We had 29, I think, applicants and we could have appointed virtually any of them, I think, and ended up with an excellent committee. The EAC, I think, is one of the most impressive committees I'm on for Council in terms of its technical expertise and passion. So I want to congratulate these new appointees if we approve this motion, as I expect we're about to, and also thank everyone who applied, because it really was an excellent standard. So I encourage you to apply again for this or other Council committees in the future.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, we'll go to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried. Moving on to urgent business, we have one item under urgent business. Councillor Lake will move that report. Yes?
Well, Mayor, I move that Council considers an item of urgent business relating to the Victorian redistribution being conducted by the AEC.
I'll second that. All those in favour of that? Yep, that is carried. Councillor Lake.
Thanks, Mayor. So, Mayor, the motion that I'd like to move, and this has been circulated to councillors earlier today, it's just a short sentence, I'll read it out. The council submit an objection to the proposed renaming of the federal seat of McMillan to Monash and suggest that the AEC instead consider renaming the seat of Hotham as Monash.
Okay. You've moved that, have you?
Yeah.
We need a seconder? Yeah, Councillor Fergus. Any discussion? Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'll explain the reason, first of all, why this is urgent business. It's only urgent business because the proposed redistribution for Victoria was released by the AEC, I think it was about 2 weeks ago. But anyway, the timing of it was such that it didn't fit into our meeting deadlines in terms of the ability to prepare a report. And also, there was I certainly had no idea prior to the interim or the draft report being released by the AEC that they were going to propose establishing a seat of Monash at all, but certainly in another part of Victoria beyond our boundaries. And so it was only after becoming aware of that and also being contacted by some residents expressing some concern around the potential for confusion with another part of Victoria in terms of McMillan, which is a seat located in Gippsland, the confusion that could arise through that area being known as Monash. So there's an ability for anybody to make an objection to either the proposed renaming of seats or indeed electoral boundaries, and I think that closes in early May. So essentially this is the only council meeting that we have in order to raise this matter if we wish to. So I said to the residents who contacted me that I would bring a report to urgent business tonight, which I've done. I believe it warrants supporting. For me, it both goes to the issue of the potential for confusion, but it also relates to what I believe to be also a basis that if the AEC is minded to name a federal seat after Sir John Monash, and I think that's utterly appropriate because, as I said earlier in the earlier debate, I think he is, if not the greatest Australian, he's certainly up there in the top 10. And if there's any seat of the, I think is there 148 House of Rep seats? Whatever it is, about 150 House of Rep seats. If there's any area in Australia which could logically bear the name Monash, it's the area that will cover most of the city of Monash, which according to the draft maps is the current seat of Hotham, which changes remarkably from what the previous Hotham boundaries were. That's the seat that will contain Monash University, Monash Medical Centre, most of the city of Monash. It will be the predominant federal seat that covers the boundaries of Monash, and it also will cover the busiest section of the Monash Freeway. So all reasons, I think, that if we're going to recognise a great Australian with a federal seat, then it would be the seat of Hotham would be the place to do it.
Well put, Councillor. Any other comments?
Yeah, I'd like to move an amendment, if I can, and that's to remove the words "and suggest that the AEC instead consider renaming the seat of Hotham to Monash," and removing all references to that within the report.
That's what. Can you run that by us again, please?
Yep. So the recommendation would basically end. Well, the recommendation would, remove "and suggest that the AEC instead consider renaming the seat of Hotham to Monash," and removing all references to that in the report.
Do you have a seconder for that? Councillor Choi, is the mover happy with that? Not happy? Okay, let's deal with it then.
Right. So I agree with Councillor Lake. I think this proposal induces confusion, but I also think it induces confusion to have a federal seat named Monash as well, for much the same reason, because we will then have people that are in the federal seat of Monash, but they're not in the city of Monash, or they're in the city of Monash, but they're not in the federal seat of Monash. And people are already extremely confused about what is state, local and federal seats. So to have two seats in the same area named after the same, or called the same thing with different boundaries, just further confuses it. It'll be the same thing as we then have a state seat named Monash. I just think that it overcomplicates and over-confuses things. I think that the city of Monash is the government area named Monash. That's the local government area of Monash, and I think that should stop there. Otherwise it just confuses everyone, and almost for the same reasons that Councillor Fergus moved the motion previously on our branding, that we need to keep the Monash brand as we are the political version of Monash.
Councillor Graff.
Yeah, thank you. I firstly don't think this should be taking up our time. I certainly have an interest in this issue, but in a private capacity, and that's why I've made a submission in my own time, and I encourage people to do that in their own time. But I don't think, and I don't know who these residents are that have contacted Councillor Lake, but other than them and maybe a few people
Point
in
of
this
order,
room.
Mayor. What's your point? Councillor Graff isn't talking to the amendment. He's talking to the substantive motion.
No, I am speaking to the amendment.
No, I'll allow Councillor Graff.
Thank you. I was going to say, I don't think that any one of our residents actually cares which federal seats are called what, although I take the point, absolutely. The name of Monash has great strength when it comes to bringing respect to federal divisions' names. Now, I actually know for a fact that people are confused about where the boundaries are. I mean, I ask people, where do you live? I live in the seat of, Chisholm, or I'm in Monash, and they don't really understand whether it's a state, federal or local council boundary. And this is definitely going to cause enormous confusion, particularly for people that have just become Australian citizens who will be voting for the first time in Australian federal elections and local council elections, which is why I support the amendment, because it states the council's concern, but it makes it clear that any other seat out of our boundaries won't have any impact on the council that we represent and any naming issues. So this amendment, I think, is far better than the substantive motion, and I think it makes more sense. If people want to spend their own time making submissions, they've got a week or so and they can do that in their own time.
Any other comments? Councillor Lee.
I agree with the amendment, because I was thinking exactly the same thing, is that you can't really have a city of Monash and then a Monash electorate, because they're basically looking at two different tiers of government, if you like, so one's local and one's federal. But how many other electorates are named after a city? Probably none, I don't know. But, I think people are used to Hotham, they're used to Bruce, they're used to these others. And I feel that Monash has had his name in a lot of things, and totally would be very confusing to people if they think, oh, well, I don't have to vote for Monash in a council election because I've voted for them in a federal election. It might even come in the same year and they'll get even more confused. So I agree with the amendment and I'm glad you put it up, Councillor James. Thank you.
Councillor Davies.
Thank you, Mayor. Just mention that I also made a submission to the AAC in a private capacity, but not on this matter. So my recollection of what happened here is that Melbourne Ports was recommended, or somebody recommended for Melbourne Ports to be renamed Monash. The AEC said, well, we're not going to do it for Melbourne Ports, but Macmillan is appropriate because that's where John Monash was born and raised, and so that might be an appropriate place to name it after him. I absolutely agree with Councillor James. This would be electoral and representative chaos to rename Hotham into to Monash. So I don't. I support the amendment in that sense. And you can just imagine you have people running around saying, "Oh, I represent Monash," and are you the federal representative or the local government or whatever? We have enough Monash locally. I just think this would be ridiculous to have a federal seat named that locally as well. So I'll support the amendment and I'll speak very briefly on the substantive if we get a chance.
Councillor Lake.
Thanks, Mayor. I note the concern of some of our colleagues around confusion, but I think it's misplaced. I mean, there's already...
Point of order?
What's your point of order?
Hasn't Councillor Lake spoken on this already?
He's talking on the amendment now.
Okay, sorry.
I mean, there's already a number of examples of where federal electorates and council areas have the same name. I mean, without having thought about it for more than the last 20 seconds or so, there's Latrobe, there's Casey, there's Hume, and there's probably countless others. In fact, there's Corangamite, isn't there? Yeah, so it's all over the place. So can I encourage people, I think the relevant note on confusion is the confusion between Monash as a geographic place in terms of the council area and the idea of a federal electorate hundreds of kilometres away in Gippsland and the confusion that could arise there. Stepping away from that and the question of Hotham or Monash and what would be the best name for the seat that takes up the predominant amount of predominant space in Monash. The question there is, what would be a more fitting recognition of a great Australian? Would it be Hotham or would it be Monash? And I think the AAC is right to want to recognise Monash, and I think he's far more deserving than Hotham, Charles Hotham, a former Governor of Victoria, for us to have our seat named after Monash rather than Hotham. Hotham wasn't born in Australia. He was born in Dennington, Suffolk, in England. Spent much of his time serving the British Empire in South America, in Africa. He came to Melbourne to be Lieutenant Governor in circumstances where he had no wish to come to Melbourne. He wanted to serve in the Navy, but he was nonetheless stationed here. In the Australian Dictionary of Biography, it's recorded that he totally misunderstood his position of governor of a sizeable Crown colony. Talks about him being authoritarian, secretive, unwilling to delegate, obstinate, and that he unnecessarily disparaged his predecessors and existing officials. He refused an amnesty for the Eureka prisoners. He was the governor at the time of the Eureka stockade. He ignored a royal commission which recommended reform of the licensing system, which he foolishly maintained that the fee was right in principle, which led to the minor stockading at Eureka. His competence was questioned by the Colonial Office, and this is the person who we acknowledge with the federal seat that is about to become the most significant federal seat in Monash. In my view, Hotham is not an appropriate person to be recognised as a great Australian. That should be Monash. The person flying or hanging on the wall of this council chamber has much more affinity with the local area.
Thank you, Councillor Lake. Anyone else wish to speak to the amendment? Councillor Fergus.
Yeah, look, I echo Councillor Lake's comments. I'm not in favour of this amendment. I think, in fact, that weakens this motion considerably. I think half the point of what we've got here, essentially, as Councillor Lake is saying, is not only protecting that brand and recognising Sir John Monash, but it's also replacing someone who is eminently unsuited to having a federal electorate that covers the majority of the city named after them, in Charles Hotham. I think that is part of the greatest benefit of this, is that we can have two federal electorates supposedly after this redistribution of which represent Australians of whom we can be really proud. I understand the arguments being put about confusion, but I don't think that's warranted. In fact, I think the opposite argument could be made. If you live in the federal seat of Melbourne and the Council of Melbourne and the state seat of Melbourne, you know that every time there's an election, you go there and you say, I'm in Melbourne, and it's the same thing. You could make an argument either way. I don't think that's particularly an issue we should be worried about. It's an issue for the ASE in terms of voter education. If they choose to do any of that at any time, that would be a great idea in my view. But I think this is, the amendment loses for me a really important part of this, which is to have a much more suitable person to be held up as someone we should be recognising in this manner.
Any other comments on the amendment? Councillor Choi.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with Councillor James. The Council submitted objection to the proposed renaming of the federal seat of Macmillan. I support it. We put an objection on it, but I'm not supporting for suggesting what ACE should do, or suggesting other electorate that should be renamed as Monash. I think they would do their job. So I'm supporting Councillor James' amendment. Thank you.
Councillor Little.
No, I'm in support of both Councillors Lake and Fergus. To say this is going to cause rampant confusion, I think, is underestimating the intelligence of people in this area. How often do you look up, which federal seat you actually belong to, or do you use it in any sort of reference? It's like once every 3 years, right? Most people, if they understand, if they even know what federal seat they're actually in, it probably only becomes relevant to them once every 3 years when the election comes up. So, to say it's going to cause rampant confusion, I think, is a gross overstatement of what the reality of the situation. I am definitely not in support of this amendment.
Okay. Everyone that's spoken, I think, has spoken. Let's put the amendment to the vote. All those in favour of the amendment? Against? Okay, the amendment is lost. Okay, back to the substantive report. You want a division? Okay, all those in favour of the amendment? Councillor Davies, Councillor Choi, Councillor James, Councillor Zagrafis, Councillor Salumi, and those against, Councillor Little, Councillor Fergus, Councillor Patterson, Councillor McCluskey, myself and Councillor Lake. Back to the substantive motion. Any other comments we put it before? Yes, Councillor Zagrafis.
Thank you very much. And I agree with Councillor Fergus. You can argue things both ways. I agree. My argument is that this report shouldn't be supported because it will cause confusion. Someone mentioned the seat of Casey and Latrobe, very different demographics to the city of Monash, very different. Migration rates are higher in the city of Monash than those other seats. Now, I don't know, but I'd be curious to know what the member for Hotham thinks. I mean, it's probably too late for this report, but I think that's something interesting to find out. I know that if this was a Liberal-held seat, a name change means it's a new seat, so they reopen pre-selections. But I make the point that the ALP submission didn't ask for Hotham to be renamed, and I think if we start going through names of divisions and trying to rewrite history, and that history is, you can't dispute it, it happened, for better or worse, it's there. You'll find, a number of different seats, so you can argue all sorts of things about certain people in history who lived in a different era, different time. So if you want to go down that route, I've tried to talk about the Armenian genocide and I never get anywhere. So I think that this report is a waste of time. I think that the ASC doesn't look at what councils want their federal seats to be named. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Can I move a procedural motion this now be put?
Okay, do you have a seconder? Yes. Councillor Davies, all those in favour of that procedural motion? Okay, it will be put. All those in favour? Okay, it's carried. Okay, we'll go to the vote. All those in favour of this item? Against? The item is carried. Thank you, Macca.
Mayor, I move that Council, having reviewed and considered the certificates in relation to the matters listed for confidential business and being satisfied that it is appropriate and necessary to consider these matters at a closed meeting, resolves to close the meeting to the public in accordance with Section 89, Section 2 of the Local Government Act 1989 for the reasons specified in the certificate.
And I'll second that. All those in favour? That is carried. Thank you.
It's attended a number of times, a really dark history for the Armenian people as Syrians. So I think it is an important commemoration to attend. And wanted to note that. I'll also wanted to just note the joint statement and thank Councillor Patterson for her apology and look forward to working with her in the future. Thank you.
Councillor James.
Just very quickly, Mayor, just because we didn't have council reports last month, I wanted to acknowledge and thank officers for all the work at Live at Warrawee. It was once again my favourite festival of the year, and it was just an absolutely brilliant night. The weather was fantastic, as it was last year, and there's a lot of work that's gone into it, and I think it's even better than it was last year, so thank you for that. Also, I want to acknowledge the EV zones that came to Oakley, Mayor, yourself and I, and Councillor McCluskey, and Councillor Davies and Councillor Salumi and Councillor Tsoi, I think we were all there. And that was a fantastic day out as well. And well done to the Oakley Trade Association for coming together as a group and organising that. I wanted to acknowledge Clayton Cricket Club that made the final of their Division 1, and unfortunately they were unsuccessful, but that's the third year in a row they're telling me they're going to win it next year. And finally, the Festival of Colours out at Monash, who I know officers worked really hard too. That was another brilliant, fantastic day, and we covered in colours again this year and didn't get sunburnt, which was a great change. So thank you for that.
Councillor Looney.
I'll just briefly, no, I went to the opening of the pavilion, which you opened, Mayor, at the Central Reserve, the football ground, and also the Anzac Day commemorations at Glen Waverley on Sunday. Went on to the Waverley RSL and to Highvale Retirement Village this afternoon to their Anzac Day celebrations, and I'm hoping it's not raining at 6 in the morning because I plan to go to the Cenotaph in the morning at 6.
Thank you, Lynette.
Okay.
Councillor McCluskey.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you.
Okay, stand.
Just quickly, I had the good fortune to represent the Mayor with the Monash Lions Club Family Fun Day at Gells Park, and they're a very small, very family-orientated group and really need some assistance in growing their numbers, and I promised I'd try and assist in some way, and I think there's some way we can work with officers and the Lions Club in order to help them progress and flourish as a club. Just to add on to your acknowledgement, Mayor, earlier of our local residents and ratepayers that are medallists at the recent Commonwealth Games, just got to add one name to that. It's Damien Schumann, who is a gold medalist in the beach volleyball and is also a teacher or former teacher at Mazenod College, one of our in our ward, and Monash College, Monash College, an ex-teacher there, and one gold medal in the beach volleyball and a volleyball coach in his own right. So congratulations as well.
Any other reports? Committee reports? Okay, well, Council, thank you very much. That concludes tonight's meeting.